Teammates betrayed the strongest man and left him to die. But legends don't die quietly, they reload. Now he's back, 20 years later, sitting in an academy classroom like an NPC with a trash attribute. Only he knows that void is the kind of power that deletes cheats instead of copying them. Greed, betrayal, and evil. It's a reset run, and he's here to settle accounts. What happens when a former legend goes undercover? Let's go. That day, the gates suddenly opened, and monsters poured into their world. The only ones who could stop them were those whose magical abilities had awakened. Representatives of the Golden Seekers, Ingolf von Dietz, Claudia Bourgeot, Nathaniel Cavell, Iwako Hideki, and Lei Roshi participated in the battle. At that moment, the boy screamed in fear. A monster was approaching him. Ingolf looked at Claudia and said, "Hey, she needs to help the victims quickly." She adjusted a strand of her hair and said, "But there are too many of them." The monster aimed its clawed paws straight at the man, but at that moment, the protagonist kicked him, sending him flying. Looking at the frightened boy, he turned around and asked, "Is everything okay? He'll take care of it." He was the leader of the Golden Seekers, Masato Kyoichiro. He then concentrated energy in his hand and, leaping into the air, charged toward the massive crowd of monsters. He unleashed a powerful, lightning-fast strike, advancing and slaying every monster in his path. Watching him, Hideki exclaimed in surprise, "It's incredible. He's facing so many of them all by himself." Before he could finish speaking, Ruokshi looked at the gate and said, "With time magic, he can see the future." Kyoichiro knew what the monsters would do next. This guy is no longer human. At that moment, the protagonist, surrounding his body with powerful energy, continued attacking the monsters one after another. Stopping near a huge dragon, he said, "So, this is the last one, right? Now he can protect the human world." He pointed his hand forward and added, "So, he'll seal the gate." The next second, there was an explosion, and he was thrown to the side, skidding to a stop on the ground. He looked ahead in confusion, seeing a magical symbol with numerous magical circuits on the gate before him. He thought, "What is this?" He'd never seen a future like this before. He approached the gate and asked, "Are they all involved in this? Why are they doing something like this?" Nathaniel chuckled. He's asking why. It's precisely because he doesn't know that he was betrayed. He put his hands in his pockets, and MC, frowning, asked, "What?" Ruoxi smiled slyly and added, "He is a level 100 monster who can use time attribute magic." Claudia said they just wanted to make money safely. Ingolf added, "He wanted to help people." Hideki pointed his finger at him and said, "And drag them into such a dangerous situation." Nathaniel closed his eyes and said, "But today is the last time they'll see him." He waved his hand, and the protagonist began to hit the barrier and shouted, "They can't be serious, can they? They have to let him out." He thought they betrayed him for reasons like that. As the leader of the Golden Seekers, he was simply desperately trying to protect the world from monsters, to save people. So why? He gritted his teeth in frustration, then heard sounds behind him, several monsters sneaking up on him from behind, but he spun around, delivering a powerful attack, and then his eyes widened in horror as he saw even more monsters moving towards him. He thought, a vision of the future. He can escape from here. His future. He asked, "This no longer exists, right?" He concentrated energy in his fist, and then flew to the attack. After a while, his body was tormented. He knelt and thought that he couldn't change the future. It seemed there was no choice. But accepting his death was no big deal. He wouldn't die so easily. He would be reborn and become stronger. He would reach the peak of his power, and he would definitely take revenge. This rage, this despair, he would preserve until the day when he could avenge all his regrets. The next second, he unleashed a powerful attack, and then a stream of powerful energy passed through him. After a while, he opened his eyes and sat up in the hospital bed. He then looked in the mirror, and placing his hand on it, said, "It seems he has been reborn." He asked, "Is this a hospital? There are so many unfamiliar machines here. How many years have passed since then? If 100, then he won't be able to take revenge on them." He remembered their faces, then looked to the side and said, "What's here?" He took the card and read, "Student ID of the owner." He said, "Student ID of the owner of this body." It seemed 20 years had passed. Then he was surprised. A void attribute. He laughed lightly, and then burst into mad laughter. He thought that in his past life, his comrades feared him for being the strongest due to his time attribute. But when he leveled up his skills to a certain level, he realized he couldn't get any stronger. But his ability to see into the future helped him see the true depth of the power of void. He looked at his hand and said that he pitied the boy, doubting that the void attribute was the strongest. But no one in his past life had it, so there was no information on how to develop this ability. That's why he was still at level 1. Perhaps he was ridiculed for having no attributes, and not just once or twice. He pressed the card to his chest and added, "He must have no doubt. Boy, he will make his name known throughout the world. He will be known as the strongest adventurer." He thought, after all, thanks to clairvoyance, he knew how to train the void attribute. He spread his arms out to the sides, concentrating energy around himself, and said that with this power, he would become the strongest and make his former comrades regret betraying him and causing his death. He thought that to take revenge on them, he first needed to level up. Afterwards, he lay down on the bed and thought, the void attribute, as the name suggests, is associated with magic that controls nothingness. Its essence lies in the ability to freely project one's imagination into reality. Imagination is something everyone is capable of, but bringing fantasies to reality is difficult. Fortunately, his body was severely damaged. If he applied the image in his mind to his body, he closed his eyes and thought that he should imagine every cell being restored by magic. The next second, the wounds on his body began to heal. Then he sat up in bed and, looking at his hand, said, "Excellent, it worked." He rubbed his hand and said, "Since this is a rudimentary spell, the recovery rate isn't that fast. If used repeatedly, the level will increase. The ability to manifest thoughts is strengthened, and the volume of images that can be transformed into reality also increases. It is through this that the creation and use of various types of magic is possible. Ultimately, this will lead to the image a person imagines being fully realized exactly as intended." At that moment, a doctor entered the room and shouted, "He's finally awake." He ran closer and, holding his hand out in front of him, ordered him not to move. He was seriously injured after the monster attacked. The protagonist lay back down on the bed, covering himself with a blanket, and thought, "I see. So that's what happened to that boy." Then the doctor added that it was a true miracle that he came to his senses after what happened, as if a saint had helped him. The MC asked what he meant by saint. The doctor was surprised. He doesn't know? He shook his head, and then the doctor said, "Pentagram saints?" The protagonist said he didn't know either. Then the doctor adjusted his glasses and looked at the documents, saying, "That's right. Needless to say, he's confused. Okay, time for a thorough examination. He'll go and prepare everything necessary, so he should wait here." MC sat up in bed and thought, "A saint? That sounds crazy. Is this one of the adventurer clans that appeared in the last 20 years? Leveling up is absolutely necessary, but he needs to understand what the present is." Then he picked up the remote and turned on the TV. The news said today's special broadcast about the SSS-ranked dungeon disaster from 20 years ago. He thought, great, a special broadcast about the incident where he was betrayed? The news anchor then said that the culprit was the leader of the Golden Seekers, a level 100-time attribute user, Kyoichiro. The protagonist shouted in surprise, "What?" He thought he was the culprit. What the hell? Then the news said he foresaw this disaster, but didn't tell anyone, planning to take advantage of the impending chaos to rule the world. The other members of the Golden Seekers prevented this from happening. They are the great heroes known as the Pentagram Saints. After a fierce battle, Kyoichiro was defeated and the dungeon was successfully sealed. This is a great feat known to all. Even now, Pentagram Saints continues to lead the world in a variety of fields. Today they invite experts too. After this, MC walked to the window and, sighing, began laughing loudly. He said that they had not only betrayed him, they had destroyed his reputation, sacrificed him, and shamelessly reaped the benefits. The world praised them as heroes. He clutched the remote control in his hand and said that he would not forgive them. He would never forgive them. He gritted his teeth, then looked at his hand and added, "I will send them all to hell." After that, he thought he needed to be careful. He couldn't be in their line of sight. He put the remote control on the nightstand, then reached for his phone and said, "That's right, the academy this boy attends." He smiled, looked at the phone screen, and said as he thought. It said, "The headmaster of the Tokugo Adventurer Training Academy, Pentagram Saints, Hideki." He asked, did he wake up and immediately know where one of them is? What luck. Then he sat down on the bed and thought, but Hideki is a cautious person. He is not the type to show his weaknesses so easily. Then he noticed the card and thought that the level difference is too great. Defeating him now is impossible. He plopped down on the bed, raised his hand, looked at the ceiling. He said that he can't do anything at level 1. For now, he will try to level up and find Hideki. He must wait. He clenched his fist and said that he is his first target, Hideki. A few weeks later, the protagonist stretched his body, looked in the mirror, and thought, good, now he can move without any problems. After a while, he began to get dressed, and the doctor looked at the documents and said he couldn't believe it. To think he'd fully recovered in just a few weeks. Could this really be a saint's blessing? The protagonist tied his tie and replied that it was not that, doctor. He thought it was all thanks to his own strength. He headed for the exit and said he was grateful for the doctor's care. The doctor replied that he should take care of himself. After that, the protagonist went outside and said that now that he'd finished his preparations, his level should be enough for now. It's time to go to the dungeon, right? He thought about what he learned from the doctor, that Asai Kyosuke's entire family had died in an accident. He said he felt very sorry for whoever was in this body. He thought that this was good for him. After all, it meant he could do whatever he wanted. After that, he approached the gate and asked, is this the place? He looked at the map on his phone, then put on his mask and hood, thinking that he wanted to try his hand here to level up and become stronger. After that, he approached a worker, grabbed his hand and shouted, hey him! The protagonist asked, what's wrong? The man shouted, he's only level 27. This is a place where adventurers must be at least level 30 to form a party and enter, and he's going to go alone? This is stupid. The protagonist said that he was sure it was fine for normal cases, but he pulled his hand away and, holding out a card, said that he was a Tokigo student. Here's the document. If he signs the consent form, everything should be fine, right? He thought that he had researched this matter while he was at the hospital. The worker said that was true, but at that moment, several guys standing nearby said, hey, enough already. One of them asked, "He's just saying this because he's worried about him. Does he understand?" His comrade chuckled and asked, "Is that so hard to understand?" He must understand the seriousness of the situation. The MC turned to the worker and asked, "He just needs to sign here, right?" He signed, and the workers shouted at him to wait. The protagonist walked on and asked, "There shouldn't be any other problems now, right?" With that said, he was grateful for his concern. With that, he walked to the gate, and then the worker pointed his fingers at the guys and shouted, "Guys, he's sorry, but please, they have to keep an eye on this guy. Letting him go like this is the end." One of them asked, "Huh?" He walked forward and asked, "Why should he?" At that moment, his comrade extended his hand towards him and asked, "Isn't that good? If no one knows, then even if something happens, it shouldn't be a problem. Or was he wrong?" After that, they ran to the gate and he shouted, "This brat is acting so tough, he needs another 100 years of training." Then the worker waved and apologized for bothering them. He was counting on them. Sometime later in the dungeon, the guy smiled and said, "Okay, they should do what they usually do." His comrades said to kill the guy and blame it on the monsters. Thanks to idiots like him, their wallets get fatter. After that, they ran forward. 10 minutes later, they continued their way deeper into the dungeon. One of the guys asked, "The road was straight up until now, right?" His comrade added, "They still haven't caught up with the brat." Then he pointed forward and shouted for them to look. There he is. At that moment, MC stood in front of a bunch of monsters. He concentrated energy around his body and then directed an attack forward, after which he swirled a whirlwind attack in his hand and directed it at the monsters, burning everyone in his path. The guys following him were surprised. It can't be. He single-handedly destroyed so many D-rank monsters. The guy raised his index finger and added, "Moreover, isn't this a rare item?" He looked at the bag full of crystals and thought that if they sold this, they could live comfortably for the next 6 months. It seemed the kid hadn't noticed yet. What an idiot. The rare item would be theirs as soon as they killed him. The next second, they charged. They stood in different places, and then the leader of them shouted, "Now, they have to take him down." They aimed several magical attacks at the main character, and he took off his mask and said, "For heaven's sake, did they really think they were so cunning?" He turned around slightly and then easily dodged all the attacks. He said no matter what era it was, there will always be scumbags trying to take what belongs to someone else. The guy turned around and shouted that he dodged. His comrade was surprised. Impossible. Are his eyes on his back or something? He must have just been lucky. At that moment, the guy concentrated energy in his hand and was already approaching the protagonist from behind, shouting that he must die. But the next second, the protagonist clenched his fist, concentrating his energy in it, and attacked his opponent, throwing him to the ground. After that, he walked forward and said that he would crush parasites like them mercilessly and use them as a stepping stone without a second thought, for the sake of his revenge, which begins right now. After some time, Hideki's assistant, Yoichi Tsudai, walked through the gate and folding his arms, asked, "Why are those guys dead? What happened here?" Meanwhile, the protagonist was sitting on the bed. He looked at his ID and said that in the D-rank dungeon, he was able to level up and experience void magic. The new spell he had acquired was Info Unknown. He can not only fake his level, but also erase dungeon entry records. He smiled and said it was very useful. Then he lay down on the bed and said, "Okay, tomorrow is his first day at the academy." After that, he looked at his phone screen in surprise. People were writing in Messenger, "Cough up the cash already. He needs to get his head out of the abyss, non-attribute." MC said, "So that's how it is." As morning came, he approached the academy, but at that moment, a classmate, Asahi Karan, stopped him. She raised her hand and called him. She smiled and said, "Good morning. Is he feeling better already?" He approached her and replied, "Thank you." She said she was glad to hear it. She was very worried. Did he know? He thought, so Kyosuke also has people who are worried about him. At that moment, some bullies approached them, one of them telling the others to look over here, to see if that non-attribute boy who narrowly escaped death was the one. Since he's protecting a level 1 weakling like him, he should get something in return. He brought it, right? He's low on money right now, so the protagonist frowned, looked at him and thought, these must be scum. At that moment, Karen stepped forward, held out her hand in front of them, and said, "Enough." Kyosuke was just discharged from the hospital. Her hand trembled, and the protagonist noticed stood in front of her, and thanking her, said he'd be fine. The bullies started laughing. A little boy without attributes. He shouldn't act tough just because there's a girl in front of him. She'll remind him that he's just a useless jerk who can't even use magic properly. In response, the MC told them not to forget where their place was, guys. One of them asked in surprise, "Huh?" The protagonist said, "Unlike those thugs, he's the one who keeps his word." With these words, he raised his hand, and one of the bullies indignantly shouted, "What nonsense is he talking about?" He concentrated energy in his hand. Karen shouted, "Don't! Magic can't be used outside of dungeons." One of the bullies told her to shut up. A talentless, attributeless person is trying to challenge him. He must receive. With these words, he sent energy forward, and the protagonist concentrated the energy in his hand and easily repelled the attack, creating a small explosion. The other bullies were surprised. "It can't be. Isn't this the same magic? He can use it?" Then, when the smoke cleared, the protagonist asked, "What? Is that all?" The bully clenched his teeth in irritation and shouted, "Damn it! He turned to his comrades and shouted, "Guys, they can't just stand there. We need to deal with him quickly." They replied, "Right now. How could he handle that?" With those words, they sent streams of energy at the protagonist, but he concentrated the energy in his hands and easily repelled their attacks. They were perplexed. What the hell? How many magical attributes can he use? He'd never heard of such a thing. Then the protagonist asked, "Are they done?" Now it's his turn. He snapped his fingers and a huge flame appeared around him. And he told them not to be afraid. He won't kill. He started approaching them and the bullies started running away in fear, screaming, "Damn it." Then MC grabbed one of them by the shoulder and asked, Kyosuke asked him to help him, right? What did he do then? Well, he didn't need his answer. He turned him around, then grabbed his cheeks, and added, "Scumbags like him always say the same thing. And that's why, no matter what he says, he won't stop that fist, no matter what." With these words, he aimed his fist filled with energy at him, and the bully flew to the ground with incredible speed. The protagonist said, "Kyosuke, no one will look down on him anymore. From now on, he will move towards his goal of becoming the strongest adventurer together with him." After that, the bullies lifted their comrade and, turning slightly, shouted, "They're sorry, okay?" Then one of them said, "Damn, he's changed a lot since being discharged." Then MC said, "In the end, they deserved it." Sometime later, he walked down the school hallway and wondered in surprise why everyone was looking at him. Then Yoichi walked forward and told him to wait. "He's Kyosuke, right? Do you have a minute?" The protagonist thought, "Who is this? He looks like a high school student, problematic. Maybe he should just brush him off." Then he smiled awkwardly and waved his hand, saying he was sorry. Classes were about to start, so, he replied, come to think of it, he hadn't told him his name. He was Yoichi, the leader of Biting the Cat. Karin was surprised. Biting the Cat, the clan that director Hideki created? Yoichi said he would ask again. He could spare him some of his time, right? MC looked at him with a smile and said, "If that's the case, then it seems like nothing can be done." After a while, they entered the classroom, and Yoichi said he would get straight to the point. He was the one who defeated the adventurers found in the D-rank dungeon last night. The protagonist asked what he was talking about. He didn't understand. He thought this information should be hidden. How did he know? He said he was told that an academy student entered the dungeon, and he went to look for him. In the dungeon, he found criminals known for preying on newbies. And on top of that, he used multi-attribute magic this morning, didn't he? MC chuckled and thought, so he doesn't know the peculiarity of his magic. Then Yoichi waved his hand and told him to answer. Was he the one who defeated them? The protagonist reached for his bag and said that, since he was suddenly attacked this morning, he doesn't remember what happened, and he's only level 1, so there's no way he could have done something like that. After that, he held out his ID, and Yoichi, looking at it, thought, his ID says level 1 and the void attribute. This trash dares to waste his time? Then he gritted his teeth and turned around, saying that he apologized for calling him. Then he turned around slightly and added, he shouldn't act suspicious in the future, okay? It's a shame that I have to do extra work. After that, they went their separate ways. The protagonist, walking down the hallway, thought, this Yoichi could be useful to him. He's hanging around Hideki and doesn't arouse suspicion. Is there a way to make him my pawn? Wait, isn't this the perfect time to test that magic? Meanwhile, Yoichi approached Hideki's desk and said that this concludes his report on what happened in the D-rank dungeon last night. He sat in a chair and said that it doesn't look like he screwed up. He told him that we need to be careful in choosing who he uses. His subordinate bowed and said that he sincerely apologized. He would try to sort out the situation. Hideki rose from his chair and said that naturally, if word got out that he participated in the rookie hunt, his reputation would suffer. Then he grabbed the guy by the face and told him not to forget this if anything went wrong. He could be thrown out in the blink of an eye. He shouted that he understood, headmaster. He clenched his teeth in irritation, furrowed his brow, and thought, damn it, why did he have to deal with this? If he'd known things would turn out this way, he would have lost a lot more money to those idiots. Then the headmaster added, with that said, there's one thing he doesn't understand. He wondered, what is it, sir? He said, according to the student in question's report, he should be at least a third-year student. But there's not a single third-year student here who entered the dungeon last night. With that, he looked at the tablet and then, putting it back in place, walked on and said, so those guys must have encountered monsters during the rookie hunt, and he's lying about it. Instead of thinking that one of his students defeated the rookie hunters on his own, that's a more realistic conclusion. With these words, he looked out the window, and Yoichi, approaching him, asked, is that really so? He answered, of course. Unless something extremely unusual had happened. He thought in surprise, unusual? Then he remembered the protagonist's ID and asked, headmaster, could it be that a unique attribute is involved? He turned around with interest. A unique attribute, you say? That was certainly possible. Then his subordinate smiled and, placing his hand on his chest, said, sir, please, he should leave this matter to him. He will resolve this matter quickly. Sometime later, in the dungeon, several students were directing their magical attacks at the monsters. Then one of the monsters jumped onto the wall next to the guy, and he cried out in fear, "Coming!" The others directed streams of energy at the monster, and then it fell to the ground. Yoichi, continuing to concentrate energy in his hand, said, "Students, you must not break formation." They began to chatter among themselves. He is simply magnificent. After all, Headmaster Hideki himself had chosen him. His comrade asked if they should join biting the cat too. Then Yoichi, looking at the monster's body, said, "Okay, he's dealt with all the monsters in the area." His subordinate saluted him and said, "Well done." He waved his hand and said he'd leave the rest to them guys. They replied, "Yes." He walked forward and said it was time to do what he came for. He reached into his inner pocket and, taking out an item, said, "Chains. This should reveal Kyosuke's location." After that, the item, imbued with energy, flew forward. Yoichi thought he knew it all along. He was far from the other students. He didn't know what this guy was thinking, but it would be best for him. If everything was handled correctly, no one would even think his death was an unusual accident, and he would simply find his body by chance. After all, that kind of thing happened a lot in the dungeon. He frowned and thought, first, that time when Kyosuke was a novice hunter, and after he was discharged from the hospital, he's been nothing but trouble. What's more, he really wondered what those guys were talking about. Not long before, Yoichi had asked, "Is this true?" One of the bullies had cried out in fear. Really? Please, he had to believe him. That non-attribute had attacked them with the exact same magic they used. His comrade had added, not only that, and that idiot had created a huge flame, the likes of which he'd never seen. Yoichi frowned and said, "It's hard to believe." Well, that's all he wanted to ask. One of the bullies had said hopefully. Then, he had answered, "And they must rehabilitate them. He doesn't need weaklings who lose to incompetence." The guy began to protest. "No, please. This isn't what he promised." Then the second bully said, "That guy has already stopped being human." In the present, Yoichi continued to walk forward with the chain and thought that this fear was abnormal. To confirm this, he sent him to a special lesson that was held in biting the cat, but it all turned out to be just a strong illusion. He must have used an artifact or something back then. He is sure that he dealt with the novice hunters in some cunning way. Then, he noticed another body and asked, "Another monster body?" And Kyosuke did this, a single fire strike? It seems that what the guys said was not such nonsense in reality. But this power is nothing. He walked forward and thought, even Hideki, who left the pentagram, could do this. For now, he has no choice but to do as he says. Well, one day he will surpass him and take a place in the pentagram, and then he will rule the world. He laughed and thought that to do this, he must not let anyone know about his connection with the novice hunters. As for Kyosuke, who will most likely cause a lot of trouble in the future, he will make sure that an accident happens to him. He must be very close. He peeked out from around the corner and said that it was strange what he could be doing in a place like this. Then he looked in confusion at the protagonist, who was sitting on a mountain of bodies, and said that he was late. He was tired of waiting. He hid behind the wall in confusion and thought, what? He hid his presence. How did he do it? How did he spot him? The protagonist said how he noticed him. That's what he was thinking. Right, Yoichi? He thought in surprise. Did he read his mind? Then he came out from behind the wall and asked who the hell he was. The protagonist said that he heard that Hideki chose him, but he is not as big a deal as he thought, and the way he preyed on newbies and took money from him, just like the cowardly Hideki. He shouted indignantly, "How did he know that?" Then the protagonist stood in front of him and said, "It seems like he really enjoys tormenting others, but he never understood what it was like to be the one being hunted." Huh? He pointed his fist at him and said, "Now he will know what it is like to be the victim, and with the help of magic, he will make him dance." Then Yoichi said, "He's a dangerous idiot, too dangerous." He took out his sword, full of energy, and said, in the name of his ambition, and today he will defeat him and become stronger. He abruptly ran to attack the protagonist, but he jumped back and concentrating energy in his hand asked, "Is that so? His real strength?" Then he sent a stream of fire at him. His opponent swung his sword and asked, "Does he think he can defeat him with such a level of skill?" Then he looked in surprise at the next attack coming at him, held his sword in front of himself trying to block it. The very next moment, sharp spears began to erupt from the ground beneath him. He swung his sword, cutting it all down, and frowned and said, "Damn, he can actually use multi-attribute magic. What's wrong with his void magic?" Before he could finish speaking, the protagonist appeared from behind him and pointed his sword at him. Yoichi held his sword in front of himself, blocking his attack and shouted, "Damn. All he can do is interfere with his plans forever." Then the protagonist jumped back and asked, "His plans?" He answered, "Yes. One day he will definitely surpass Hideki, take his place and rule the world." He asked, "Why him? Are there other saints?" He asked. Why was he asking Hideki? Because he was an outcast among the saints. If he became a saint, he could conquer the world. Wouldn't it be logical to start with the weakest link? The protagonist sighed and said, "Disgusting." He was surprised. Why? MC slung his sword over his shoulder and said that he could have gotten to Hideki first. But since he was such a pathetic worm, he had nothing to fear. His opponent shouted indignantly, "Shut up!" He charged, shouting, What's wrong with the thirst for power? He dealt a few blows and shouted, what's wrong with wanting money and women? The protagonist easily repelled his attacks. Then he continued, the power that will help silence everyone who is dissatisfied, get whatever he wants. That's the power he craves. And he added, if he remains a saint, he can do whatever he wants. And once he takes that place, he will make that woman his. It seems not. Before he could finish speaking, the protagonist said that there was no point in listening to him. It was time to finish. Then he smashed his opponent's sword, and he fell to the ground and shouted, this! The protagonist concentrated energy around himself, approaching him. He said that all thanks to his story, he managed to prepare the spell. He shouted indignantly, he shouldn't come near. MC added, he must dance for him. He used absolute hypnosis. Yoichi's eyes changed, and then he fell to the ground. The protagonist looked at him and thought, this spell requires effort, because first it must break the opponent's spirit, but as soon as it begins to work, he will. He said, he must get up. The next second, Yoichi began to rise and said, sir, I am following orders. The protagonist smiled and thought, I think it worked. He told him to focus on completing the mission. He will give instructions later. He replied, yes, everything is clear. The protagonist told him to behave as usual. He turned around and said that he would return to the main group. And then the MC came out from around the corner. Karin came up to him and called out to him anxiously. Where had he been? She was so worried. In response, he smiled awkwardly and, apologizing, said that he was just chatting with Yoichi. She was surprised with Yoichi. What were they chatting about? He replied that they were discussing how to make dreams come true. She asked if he had come up with any useful tips. He confirmed it. He had given him excellent advice. Thanks to this, one of his dreams would definitely come true. Karin smiled and said that she hoped he wouldn't have to wait long. He replied that he hoped so too. Then Yoichi shouted, practice will be over soon. Students, they must go back. Karin, looking at the protagonist, smiled and said that they must go, or else they will be abandoned. She went ahead and he followed her and thought that he was truly glad that he could practice here. After all, he's taken possession of a pawn that Hideki won't suspect. After some time, Hideki asked, so, is the process moving forward? Yoichi handed him a photo and replied, yes sir. As expected, the student with unique abilities had developed. This was student Kyosuke, a first year with the aspect of darkness. He was interrogating him, and he admitted to using multi-magic for the purpose of defeating the hunters. Hideki asked, multi-magic? What was he talking about? He smiled and replied, the details are unknown right now. If he gives him a little more time, he'll return with more information. By the way, how long has it been since he's held on to his position, director? He replied that he's holding on very well. It's been a while since he's tortured anyone. He's prepared to pay him handsomely for all the trouble he's brought upon the two of them. Yoichi said, then. Hideki extended his hand and said that he'll give the order later. He bowed and replied, sir, they'll meet later. At that moment, Hideki answered the call and said he was on the line. Ruoshi, smiling, said, oh my god, their beloved director. She was grateful he'd chosen them yesterday. He told her not to drag it out, Ruoshi. She asked, he wouldn't bite, would he? Even despite the fact that they were partners and shared these charming work duties, he leaned back in his chair and said she wasn't changing. She should excuse him, but he was busy right now. She should save this idle chatter for another day. She wondered what the handsome director could possibly be doing, managing an academy that had already lined its pockets, at least in theory. He indignantly told her to watch her tongue. He was researching a student with a dark aspect. She asked, a dark aspect? Why would he do that, the loser? He asked, did she know? This spectrum is quite unique. Anything could happen with this, right? She asked, just like with Kyuichiro, who uses the time aspect of magic. He shouted at her not to mention him. It was infuriating. She said he was still as choleric as ever, but she couldn't blame him. When he awakened this power, the balance of power among the adventurers shifted considerably. Well, she'd contact him later in that case. Good luck. Hideki angrily threw the phone down on the table and shouted, you narcissistic beast! Even so, mentioning that damn name after so long pisses him off. Then wasn't it time for an emotional outburst? After a while, he approached the shed with the lock and wondered, how should he torture him now? He channeled energy into the door and uttered, he would release all the anger he couldn't take out on Kyoichiro. Excellent. It opened. After that, he opened the doors and said that he apologized for keeping him waiting, Yoichi. Then he was surprised to see an empty chair and asked, what? No one's here. Before he could finish speaking, Yoichi attacked him from behind, but Hideki stopped his sword with his hand and told him he was underestimating him. He must have gotten really arrogant, right? Did he really think he could defeat him so easily? He aimed several magic chains at him and bound his entire body, then kicked him aside. He shouted, there's no way someone like him will ever be his equal. The student fell to the ground, and he said he made a bad decision. You idiot. He killed himself with his stupid desires, Yoichi. At that moment, the protagonist said that he saw that he was still just as much of an idiot. Hideki turned around in confusion and shouted, who's there? The MC said that he still bowed down to the strong and reproached the weak. He seemed just as pathetic and stupid. Hideki shouted indignantly, how dare he? He's the academy's principal. The protagonist asked, killed himself with his stupid desires. Sounded like a perfect introduction to him, Hideki. He shouted, idiot. Who is he? He'll destroy him. He had to give him his student number. The protagonist smiled and told him to wait. He'd finally gotten around to it. So they shouldn't rush, they needed to chat. The protagonist asked, why don't they just chat? Hideki concentrated energy in his hand and said, he dares to make a fool of him. He clenched his fist and said that he would show him how great the difference in their powers was. He must try his earth magic. The next second, a huge stone hand erupted from the ground and then flew forward. He said that no student like him would escape this attack. He punched forward and shouted that he must die. The huge hand approached the protagonist and then a small explosion occurred. Hideki started laughing maniacally and shouted, this is what happens when students like him get cocky. Then Hideki asked, had he gone too far? He'd have to find a new place to torture him. Well, he still didn't know who he was, but he'd have to stay here and watch him die. He took a handkerchief out of his inside pocket and, wiping his face, looked ahead in surprise as a silhouette appeared from the smoke that had scattered in all directions. He said in surprise, oh my god. The MC asked, didn't he offer to chat? Hideki, perplexed, asked, what? He survived even though he was hit? That can't be. He pointed a finger at him and asked, who is this idiot? He has to say his name. The protagonist smirked. Who is he? Doesn't he know him? Hideki was surprised. What? He'd never known such idiots. Stop chatting. He has to say his name. The protagonist said he hurt his feelings. Had he really forgotten about him? Hideki noticed a familiar face and said in surprise, no, him, no. He grabbed his head and added, this guy is definitely an idiot. He needs to stop acting like he's something. He must have read the latest news. This guy, Kyoichiro, is already dead. With these words, he concentrated energy in his hand. MC calmly closed his eyes and said, he's always been like this. He only believes in what benefits him and ignores everything else. Hideki told him to stop talking nonsense. He should come closer and let himself be killed. The protagonist answered, I understand. He was satisfied by the sweet words of those around him. He concentrated energy in his hand and said, so he betrayed him, Kyoichiro, right? Hideki aimed an attack forward and shouted at him to shut his mouth. The protagonist swung his hand, easily cutting through the attack coming at him. Hideki, perplexed, said, it's magic, the same one Kyoichiro used in the past. He doesn't believe it. He knelt down and said, they definitely locked him in the dungeon. MC came closer and said that he was locked and thrown into the depths of despair. Hideki asked if he was really Kyoichiro. The protagonist sat down opposite him and said that so much time had passed, it had been a long time since they had seen each other, but he liked that he remembered him, Hideki. Hideki said, he is Misato Kyoichiro. He waved his hand and irritably ordered them not to take him for a fool. This means he died and returned to this world. He created a stream of mana and shouted, ghosts are supposed to be quiet. It headed towards MC and he jumped back, putting his hands in his pockets. Kyoichiro looked up, where an energy fist was already aimed at him. Hideki said, insolent brat. He frowned and thought, but he needed to seize the advantage. In the days of the gold diggers, he was no fighter. Even to this day, the other holy pentagrams laugh at him for this. However, that does not mean he is weak. He began to spread his mana in different directions and said, here is the secret technique he spent 20 years creating. Dual magic of wind and earth. Hideki created a huge stream and ordered to receive. The mana stones flew towards MC and scattered in different directions. Hideki asked, how does it feel? This is his strongest magic. He frowned and looked ahead, thought that he was not fighting back. He laughed joyfully and shouted, it worked. He did it. He defeated that idiot, Misato Kyoichiro. He thought he hadn't changed at all after so many years. Idiot. No matter how strong his time attribute was, it was all in the past. How many years did he think had passed since then? 20 years. A terrible 20 years. The him he knew was already in the past. He shouldn't have carried the sack with him. Hideki extended his hand and said, since 20 years had passed, his level had risen. It was only natural that he had become stronger. He exhaled and said, he had finally defeated Kyoichiro. He wouldn't let the others look down on him anymore. The true strongest among the pentagram saints? That's him. Suddenly he was interrupted by a voice that asked, is he finished? Hideki's eyes widened in confusion when he saw MC and said, he? How? After so many attacks? Kyoichiro asked, apparently he became capable of powerful magic, as expected of a hero of the current era. And now, he sent mana through his body and said, he can release his anger without holding back. He clenched his fist and Hideki thought, this guy? He's a monster, but he can't back down now. Not after he worked so hard to get here. He screamed. He won't let him get in his way again. He stretched his huge hand forward and tried to grab MC's body, thinking he got it. Kyoichiro said, oh my. He was still barking loudly. He created a huge stream of water and neutralized the opponent's magic. He asked, does he think this is enough to defeat him? Hideki clenched his jaw and said, no. He ordered not to approach him. Not to approach. Kyoichiro spread his arms out to the sides and created a large vortex of energy. It headed towards Hideki, who covered his face with his hands. He screamed and flew into a tree. MC created fire mana when suddenly Hideki fell to his knees and asked for forgiveness. Kyoichiro. He begs him, forgive him. It is his fault for what happened 20 years ago, so please. MC looked at him silently, and Hideki thought, Kyoichiro was a stupid kind person. If he does that, then it was definitely him. MC told him to shut up. Hideki looked up and MC said, that's exactly how he caught him then? He thinks he'll let it happen again? Hideki asked Kyoichiro to wait. They were friends, right? Kyoichiro said, he has no right to say those words. not after he turned him into a demon of vengeance. He clenched his fist and started punching Hideki. Blood spurted out of his mouth, and he thought he should never have messed with this guy. MC swung his fist and hit Hideki again, causing him to fly back. He said he should thank him for not killing him. He still wants to ask something, but he can't hear him, right? After a while, he woke up and MC said he finally woke up. Hideki screamed in fear. Please let him not kill him. MC shook his head and said, well, he won't kill him, but he will answer his questions, right? Hideki nodded, and Kyoichiro reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and said, okay, then first. He showed him the phone screen and ordered him to tell him about this woman. A name was visible on the phone screen, Lei Roshi. Hideki held out his hand and said, it's his. MC interrupted him and said, judging by his call history, this Lei contacted him today. What were they talking about? Hideki lowered his head and said, this. Since Lei is coming to Japan in 3 days, he thought that this is what she wanted to discuss. But Kyoichiro thought, I see. Lei in 3 days. He said he decided what to do next. He threw the phone to Hideki and said he will return it to him. Let him behave with Lei as usual. However, not a word to her about his identity. While he was unconscious, he cast one spell on his heart. So if he blurts out to her who he is, MC created a stream of fire and clenched his fist, imitating the sound of an explosion. He said to watch out and not let him down. Did they agree? MC turned around, started to leave and thought, he didn't actually use such magic, but knowing Ivanko's character, this bluff should be enough. He won't use absolute hypnosis on him, Ivanko, because he wants him to despair, maintaining complete composure. 3 days later, on a plane, a flight attendant walked through the cabin, and Lei sat in her seat and looked out the window. Shinyu said, Miss Lei, they are almost there. The flight attendant said, ladies and gentlemen, the plane will arrive shortly. At that moment, a loud scream was heard, and the bandits said, they are now taking over this plane. They pointed their pistols and ordered everyone to get on the floor immediately. If they did not obey their orders, Lei got up from her seat and rushed towards him, sending mana through her body. She quickly attacked him and rushed to another bandit. People looked at this in surprise and said, it's Lei Roshi from the Holy Pentagram. They are saved. Lei pushed the guys to the floor and the plane was able to land. The police took the bandits away and a man approached Lei and said, Miss Lei, he cannot express how grateful he is to her. Lei smiled and replied she was glad she was on the same flight. Thanks to this, they also avoided damage to the airline's reputation. But more importantly, it seems to be a special type of weapon that is not detected by detectors. Lately, there have been more and more cases of groups armed with equipment made from materials obtained from dungeons. That's why she needs to issue her staff with self-defense gear. She put her hand on the man's shoulder and said, like what he's wearing? The man bowed and said, of course, he will definitely provide it. In the airport building, Lei called and said, it was her. She ordered the hijackers to be released. Shinyu asked, everything went smoothly, right? Lei replied, yes, it was even interesting. The fake hijackers helped seal the deal after all. She ordered them to look toward where the cheerful people with the banner were standing. Lei spoke. It seemed to have also had a good effect on her public image. The people were joyfully shouting, Miss Lei, as expected of the heroine Lei Ruoxi. Lei passed by them and waved, smiling sweetly. She walked to the car and said, now, it's time to get down to the business she came to Japan for. Sometime later, Hideki was standing by the window in the principal's office when there was a knock on the door. He turned around and saw Lei, who apologized for the intrusion, Iwako. She sat down on the sofa and said, he said he was investigating the case of a student with the void attribute. Any progress on that? Hideki replied, no, it turned out to be a false alarm. Just like she said, he's a worthless loser. Lei asked again, really? Even if it's a unique attribute, it's ultimately nothing special. Hideki thought that if he said anything unnecessary, a magic spell would work. He just needed to answer normally. Lei put the cup on the table and said, then she would move on to what she really wanted to talk about, regarding the new medicine they were developing. Will they choose the next test subject? He used this academy system well, didn't he? First, with the student list. MC stood on the roof with an earpiece in his ear and listened to everything she said. He said, how low? The next one to know despair will be her, Lei Roshi. After a while, they said it on the news. That's where today's news ends. Yesterday, Lei Roshi from the Pentagram Saints arrived in Japan. She is being praised everywhere for dealing with the bandits who, MC thought, Lei Ruoshi. She's one of those who betrayed him 20 years ago. She produces unique weapons from dungeon materials, and it seems she made a fortune from it. But judging by the recent conversation with Iwako, it seems she uses the school for shady dealings. He got dressed and continued to think. In public, she's a heroine, but behind the scenes, she uses others. Yes, he won't let this go so easily. MC left the room and headed to school. He took out his phone and thought, but how should he best approach it? Security here was already strict as soon as he arrived at this academy. He read on the phone screen, Lei Roshi of the Holy Pentagram deals with hijackers. On the plane Lei was flying on, an incident occurred on the way to Japan. Kyosuke thought first while he was sorting out the situation. A voice came from behind him. Kyosuke. He turned around and said, it was her, Asahi. She smiled and said, Good morning. She looked at Kyosuke's phone and asked, is he reading the article about Lei, right? MC replied, yeah, he's just browsing. Karen smiled and asked, Lei is amazing, right? Yesterday she dealt with all those bandits on her own, and her clan, the Great Snake Changshan, is also popular. MC asked again, Changshan? Karen replied, there were a lot of strong members gathered there. Kyosuke thought, I see. Those people in black suits who were guarding Lei, are they from that clan? Karen said, many students here are planning to join the army. What about him, Kyosuke? MC laughed and said, no way. He thought, wait, if he can use this clan, then maybe he will get a chance to get closer to Lei. That's it, he said. Thank you, Karen. Thanks to her, he understood what he had to do. He quickly ran down the hallway, and Karen looked after him, puzzled. She asked, you're welcome? After a while, Hideki looked at the ringing phone with irritation and answered, it's him. MC ordered him to listen. He needed a favor. Hideki asked, what exactly? Kyosuke answered, if Lei contacts him. At that moment, the doctors were standing next to the tied-up guy. He was breathing heavily, and the doctors were writing everything down on pieces of paper. Lei laughed and asked, well, how are you feeling? The guy screamed, please, please, let them stop injecting him with this medicine. If this continues, he'll die. Lei swung her leg and hit him in the face. She said, it can't be. She doesn't listen to the opinions of lab rats. He shouldn't be so pessimistic. If his body is compatible with this medicine, he will become even stronger. She walked away from him, snapped her fingers and said, so they can continue. The doctor started working, and the guy screamed in fear, let them wait. They applied the medicine, after which the guy wheezed and passed out, and water flowed from his mouth. Lei asked, is this a loss of speech ability this time? It seems that without at least basic magic skills, nothing will work. They still need more data. Shinyu said they will need new test subjects soon. Lei folded her arms and said, right, as usual, on the outside, they will frame this as a recruitment of new recruits for the Great Serpent of Changshan. She dialed the number and asked, yes, Iwako, about those test subjects they talked about earlier. The elevator announced that they were going up. She said she needed those who had such skills in magic. Maybe select a few students from his academy? Hideki asked. In that case, maybe they could do that? They could hold a selection at the academy. That way they could find skilled ones, right? Lei said contentedly. Wow, it turns out he sometimes comes up with some pretty good ideas. The elevator announced that they had gone up to the first floor. Lei said the date, time, and details would be announced later. Hideki hung up the phone and thought he had done everything as Kiyochiro asked. After a while, Shinyu asked for attention, an important announcement. The Great Snake of Changshan decided to hold a selection exam in order to find new students. The guys asked in surprise, seriously? This is their chance to get into that popular clan. Kyosuke smiled and thought, now the path to getting closer to Lei is open. After a while, on the sports ground, Shinyu said they thanked them for coming to the selection exam for the Great Snake of Changshan. He will explain how the exam will be conducted. First of all, MC thought that in order to join the Great Snake of Changshan and get close to Lei, he had to pass this selection. When he approached Iwako, he tried not to attract attention to himself, but this time it was the opposite. To attract the attention of young Shinyu, Lei's right-hand man, and the examiners, he would demonstrate his strength. After that, Karen cried out, Kyosuke. He looked in her direction and she asked, he's also passing the selection, right? MC replied, yeah, and she is too, right? He narrowed his eyes and thought he didn't want her to get involved, but Karen smiled and said, she knows she doesn't belong here at all, but she has her own reasons for wanting to join. Kyosuke looked at her questioningly, and Karen suggested that the two of them try to pass together. MC replied, yeah, he thought he had to pass, no matter what. After a while, the man on the sports ground said, now they will begin the test to measure magical power. This measuring device visualizes the magical power of anyone who touches it. They measure their magical power here, so please let them approach one at a time. The guy walked up to the orb and shouted loudly, slamming his palm on it. The man wrote down his results and said, next, Asai Kyosuke. MC smiled and asked him to test it. The man asked, level 30 and void? Kyosuke walked up to the orb, and the man thought he wasn't expecting anything special. Not at all. MC placed his hand on the orb, and then a bright glow illuminated everything around. Everyone stared at it in surprise, and the guy shouted, what the hell? This is unbelievable. Kyosuke removed his hand from it and asked, will that do? The man said in surprise, yes, of course. He wrote down rank S in the table next to his name. Magic skill test. MC created a flow of mana, and the man thought, can he really only create a lump of earth? High magical power alone is not enough. Kyosuke grinned and created a stream of water, and the man looked in surprise at the two different streams of mana around him. At the same time, MC created several more spheres, and the man asked all the basic attributes, and at the same time, Kyosuke thought, well, how are they? To see the void attribute, which everyone laughs at as useless, do such a thing. Karen shouted joyfully, this is amazing, Kyosuke. MC smiled and said, thank you. She should try her best too. After a while, Karen stepped forward and created a stream of mana, directing it to the flower bed. With her magic, the flowers began to grow and bloom. The guys grinned and asked, is that all she can do? Revive dead flowers? Nothing special. Kyosuke looked at this in surprise and thought, is this light attribute magic? It's a pretty rare attribute. However, it must be difficult for the examiners to evaluate it. He felt a little sorry for her, but he thought it was better for her not to be dragged into all this. At that moment, Shinyu looked after her and wrote down in his phone, Asahi Karin, she's worth trying as a test subject. After a while, he said, finally, they will have solo fights. These guys will be their opponents. The guy asked fearfully, did they want them to fight members of the Great Snake of Changshan? Shinyu spread his hands and said, no need to worry. They won't judge them by victory or defeat. What matters is how they fight. He narrowed his eyes and thought, well, a student basically can't defeat any of them. After a while, the guy laughed and asked, was he the student who caused a commotion? Kyosuke stood in front of him and looked at him. The guy said, it looks like he was showing off and showed good results in other tests, but he will show him that none of this matters in a real fight. Kyosuke smiled and said, yes, he hopes to learn a lot from him. The guy chuckled and said, he will finish with one blow. He created an earthen flow and sent it towards MC, who quickly blocked and pushed it away. The stones flew back at the guy, who asked in confusion, what the? He destroyed his magic with one blow. He looked ahead, where MC had just stood and thought, did he disappear? Kyosuke snuck up behind him and put an ice cube to his throat. He asked, is this what they call real combat, creating a mist using magic? He learned a lot. The man reported, the winner, Asai Kyosuke. Shinyu stood behind and thought, did he defeat a member of the Great Serpent of Changshan? Yes. Who is this student? After the exam is over, he will allow Lei and reported it. Lei asked, did he find someone interesting? Shinyu replied, regarding that, there's one interesting student. Lei asked again, an interesting student? Shinyu replied, yes. He passed the exam with overwhelmingly high results. However, it seems he has the void attribute. She thought, void attribute? Could this be the student Iwako was watching? She laughed and said, it looks like she'll get a very interesting test subject. After a while, Shinyu said, and now he will announce the names of those who passed the selection exam. First, Asai Kyosuke. The guys behind him started muttering. Of course he passed. The exam was just a joke. MC smirked and thought, everything went exactly according to plan. Now he can get closer to Lei. Shinyu said, next is Asahi Karin. She widened her eyes in surprise and said, yes. Kyosuke wondered, was Asahi chosen too? He didn't think that just a unique attribute would be enough to pass. It looks like Lei is using the academy students for some of her dark plans. There must be a reason they chose Karin. She noticed his gaze and smiled happily. MC exhaled and thought, well, no matter. He wouldn't let them lay a finger on her. He just needed to achieve his goal by protecting her. The Great Serpent of Changshan. A few days after the exam, at the Japanese branch of Lei's company, Shinyu said, welcome to everyone who passed the selection. They will conduct a compatibility check today before officially inducting them into the Great Snake of Changshan. Also, Lei Ruoshi will be arriving. MC frowned tensely, and Shinyu said, she'll meet them after the check. Now they'll give them a tour. MC and Karen followed him through the branch, and Kyosuke thought he would like to go straight to Lei, but he can't leave Asahi right now. Karen happily asked, being in such a huge building really makes you nervous, right? Kyosuke answered, yes, right? Karen muttered, but the fact that she was able to join the Great Snake of Changshan makes her very happy. Kyosuke asked, by the way, why does she want to join the Great Snake of Changshan? Karen replied, her mother is in the hospital and the treatment is very expensive. MC answered, I see, he thought, so it's for mom's sake, not for himself. Now he has to protect her even more. Shinyu waved his hand towards the stairs and said, they're here. MC thought, the basement then. They went down and Kyosuke started looking around. He wondered if this was a testing facility. Then it was definitely their doing. Shinyu ordered it closed, after which the doors slammed behind the students. Everyone looked at this in confusion, and Kyosuke thought, apparently they don't intend to let anyone out, right? They're quite serious. The boys screamed, what does this mean? Shinyu ordered them to shut up, causing fear. He said, as he explained earlier, they will now conduct a compatibility test. He took the medicine with a syringe from his assistant's hands and said, more specifically, a compatibility test with a new medicine they were developing in secret. This new medicine, created from ingredients obtained in dungeons, is capable of dramatically enhancing physical abilities and magical power. The guys asked, what? Then isn't it good? MC stood behind the others and asked, does this medicine have any side effects? Shinyu chuckled and said, it would be easier to show. An image of a guy appeared on the screen, asking them to wait. He is still? Everyone watched in fear what was happening on the screen and the guy's death. A loud scream rang out. What the hell is that? Shinyu replied, what they just saw is a person incompatible with the new medicine. Does that answer their question? The guys shouted in irritation. What nonsense! There was no way they would take this. They activated their energies and ordered them to be released from here. MC ordered Karen not to leave him. She looked at him in surprise. Shinyu released his mana, clenched his fists and hit the guys. They fell to the floor, and he adjusted his gloves and said, well, the number of samples has decreased. Maybe they should start with that girl? Karen's eyes widened in fear as Shinyu began to draw the medicine into the syringe. He said it must be the light attribute student. He eagerly awaits the results of the experiment. Karen looked at him in fear as he continued to advance. Suddenly, MC stood in front of her, and Shinyu asked what he was doing. Kyosuke said he was keeping scum like him away from her. Shinyu clicked his tongue in irritation and ordered him to be captured. The guards approached MC and joyfully flexed their fists. The guard began swinging his fists when Kyosuke suddenly attacked him with his mana. The other guards looked at this warily and asked, "What the hell?" Kyosuke rushed to attack the others using his power. Shinyu said, "That can't be. He thought all these people in one blow." MC turned around and said, "He's next." Shinyu frowned and thought, since that's how it is, if he just captures this woman then. Karen screamed in fear. No. MC stopped Shinyu and said, he thought he said he wouldn't let him near her. Shinyu screamed in irritation. Horror. He thought, who is this guy anyway? An ordinary student shouldn't be capable of this. Kyosuke interrupted his thoughts and ordered him to get ready. He waved his hand and ordered Karen to stay behind him. She said, "Thank you, Kyosuke." She thought, Kyosuke is amazing. She couldn't even follow his movements. She knew he had gotten stronger, but she didn't think it would be to this extent. Shinyu frowned and said, "Idiot, don't let him get cocky." MC said to let him ask one question. The academy students are used as guinea pigs. Why would they do that? Shinyu chuckled and waved his hand. It's very simple. Because those who follow Miss Lei can gain her blessing. Once their medicine is developed, it will become even more powerful. Kyosuke frowned and asked, "So they think it's acceptable to conduct such inhumane experiments for this purpose?" Shinyu replied, "They just use what's available. That's all that matters. Besides, he thinks it's an honor for them to serve as their test subjects." MC remembered Karen's words, that her mother was in the hospital and the treatment was very expensive. The fact that she was able to join the Great Snake of Changshan made her very happy. MC clenched his fists and Shinyu pointed his finger at Karen and said, "And this girl too. She must be over the moon to become theirs." MC ordered him to shut up and released his mana. Shinyu covered his face with his hands and looked at him in surprise. Kyosuke asked irritably, "Does he even understand who he is? He's nothing but trash who tramples on others. He doesn't even understand Asahi's feelings." Karen said Kyosuke. Shinyu thought, what kind of incredible pressure is this? Is he really just a student? He chuckled and said, normally he would tell him to keep a low profile, but he likes his boldness. How about serving Miss Lei too? If he hands that girl over to them, she might even make him a leader. He's sure Miss Lei will be very pleased. MC said. He told him to shut up. He can't forgive people like him. Shinyu straightened his tie and said, he'll regret this. He clenched his fists and released his mana. The floor beneath him cracked from the strain, and Kyosuke asked, body enhancement magic, right? Shinyu answered, that's right. Combined with his martial arts, it's his invincible technique. Let him attack. He pushed off the floor and ordered to receive. He jumped back to the floor, because MC deftly dodged. Karen stood behind, covering her mouth with her hands. She thought, this power. Shinyu turned around and said thoughtfully, it looks like he managed to dodge. Kyosuke thought, he understood. So this is body enhancement magic. It's really powerful. In that case, Shinyu screamed, he can't avoid the next blow. Kyosuke told himself to concentrate and turn this into an image. Shinyu screamed, what is he doing? Giving up, he swung his fist and commanded to die. MC's void magic was activated, so he quickly put his hand in front of the opponent's fist. Shinyu said, no way. He thought, is this the same power as his? No, it's even stronger. Kyosuke smirked and said, it seems he can use body enhancement magic. Thanks to him for this. Thanks to him, he was able to pull all this off. He clenched his fist and punched Shinyu in the stomach. He flew back and hit his back against the wall. Shinyu thought, this is incredible. Who is he? MC looked in his direction, frowning deeply. After a while, Karen thanked Kyosuke. He asked, is she okay? He will pave the way, so they should all get out of here. The guys woke up and asked, but where is he? Kyosuke went to the wall and smashed it, going inside. He said that he had to do something. At that moment, Lei was informed. Miss Lei, there is an emergency. It looks like Mr. Yang has been defeated and the students have escaped. She turned around and asked, what? A voice came from the phone. An incredibly strong guy is heading here. Before he could finish speaking, there was suddenly a hissing sound. Lei asked, what the hell is going on? MC said, he is here. Lei asked, who is he? Why did he come here? Kyosuke interrupted her and said, for a simple reason. He came to repay her for what she did 20 years ago. Lei asked again, a debt from 20 years ago? What is he even talking about? MC said, she apparently doesn't understand. Should I explain it to her? She looked at him, puzzled, and Kyosuke said, ever since the SSS-ranked dungeon appeared 20 years ago, all of them, the holy pentagrams, they are considered heroes. He would say that on that day, one person's evil intent was revealed. Lei waved her hand and asked, what is he? A student, ranting about here. Is this an attempt to lecture her on history? MC put his hands in his pockets and said, the holy pentagrams are now leaders in all the major spheres of the world. They are hailed as heroes who defeated evil. Lei frowned and said, so what exactly is he? Kyosuke said, and yet, this is far from the truth. Lei asked irritably, what did he say? She thought, his aura suddenly changed. MC said, they sacrificed their own comrades to reap the benefits and build their legacy. Even now, they trample on the will of those who once stood beside them. Isn't he right? Lei smirked and asked, is that what he's talking about? Does he really believe these conspiracy theories? Kyosuke replied, it's not just a conspiracy theory. He knows what they did. They pushed their comrades into the gate. Lei's eyes widened in fear and wondered why. Why does some random student know about this? Kyosuke asked. She still didn't get it, Lei. Who is he really? He's Misato Kyoichiro. Lei said in fear. That's impossible. MC said. It's true. He used the very power that made them call him a monster. Lei said earlier, a level 100 person capable of using time magic, that's a monster. Lei sighed loudly and said in fear, that can't be. Kyoichiro, it's him. Kyosuke said, he also knows what Lei's company has been doing in secret. If he makes this public, their reputation is ruined. Lei ordered him not to dare to interfere with her. MC asked again, don't dare interfere? He should be the one saying that. For what happened 20 years ago, and for trampling on the hopes of a girl who gave it her all, he will never forgive her for this. Lei smirked and said not to downplay her power. He is not in Misato's body anymore. Since he dared to appear before her, she will make him regret it. She grabbed a stick and released her mana, destroying the cabinet. MC jumped back, and Lei asked, how is he? This is the power of a weapon developed by the Lei Company. It is forged from dungeon materials, stronger than any steel. She ordered to let him demonstrate how sharp it really is. She rushed to attack MC, but he quickly and dexterously dodged. Lei smirked and said, it seems like all he can do is dodge. She thought something was wrong. Why are the attacks not hitting? Kyosuke replied, he understands. She was too carried away by the role of corporate queen. Her movements became clumsy. She's no better than Iwako now. Lei frowned in irritation. Veins appeared on her face. She screamed, stop talking nonsense. She threw her weapon towards MC. It hit MC's body. Lei thought happily, she did it, she hit him. Kyosuke said, what a pity. He stood on the other side from his clone, and Lei said discontentedly, how dare he? She frowned and thought, was that void magic? She had never heard of it working like that. If so, she took out her sword and launched a spell at that mana, deciding that she would finish him off with the next blow. Lei screamed loudly. She would make sure his mouth finally shuts. Let him have it. She approached MC and put her sword at it, but Kyosuke grabbed it with 2 fingers. Lei said, it's impossible. Kyosuke said, apparently this is where her power ends. She really has become worse than 20 years ago. Lei thought, then she has no choice but to use it. She ran towards the table and MC asked, what is she? He widened his eyes in surprise when he saw the syringe in Lei's hands. She injected it into her neck and was covered in purple mana. She asked, is he going to do that, monster? Lei's body transformed, and she said that now he won't be able to defeat her. MC asked, so she's trying to win using some kind of enhancement medicine? Does she really think it's that easy? Lei chuckled and ordered him not to downplay her strength. Does he even realize how much time and money went into that? She collected materials that can only be found deep in the dungeons, and she spent years perfecting that serum. Ever since she witnessed that inhuman strength 20 years ago, she's been looking for a way to reach the same level. And now, she has gained power that surpasses all. She has him to thank for this. Kyoichiro. MC replied, pathetic. Surpassing all, she says, and she boasts of it. Relying on the medicine? Lei asked with displeasure. What did he just say? Kyosuke apologized for interrupting her monologue, but it was time for him to put an end to this. Lei swung her hand and said, okay. She offered to find out once and for all who was stronger. She ordered him to get ready. Lei flew past MC, who stepped aside. She punched the wall with her fist and asked, well, how does he like it? This is the fruit of her research. She'll send him to the next world again. She approached Kyosuke and threw him into the wall. She decided she had won. At that moment, an ice flow pierced her leg, and MC said that he had planted it when she launched her attack. Lei screamed in irritation. How? Kyosuke clenched his fist and spoke. Thanks to her henchman using this earlier, he understood how they use body enhancement magic. Her medicine is impressive, of course, but all she has achieved is pathetic attempts. Lei asked, does he dare mock the results of her research? Kyosuke ordered her not to talk nonsense. She tramples on people, and she has the nerve to call it progress? She disgusts him. Lei released mana through her body and swung her clawed hand. She ordered him to shut up. MC grabbed her hand and attacked, and Lei said, her power, it doesn't work. She fell to the floor and hit her head. Kyosuke thought, this is Kyoichiro's power now. He went to the exit and said, Lei, this was never real power. After a while, he went outside and Karen screamed, Kyosuke. He turned around and said, Karen, is she okay? She said yes, and so was he. At that moment, loud screams began to be heard. Everything was exactly like in the tip. Lei's company was attacked. Karen asked, was it him? Kyosuke asked, who knows? He thought, now the truth about Lei's crimes is revealed. The test subjects are safe, and Lei has lost everything. Karen said, Kyosuke. She doesn't fully understand what's going on, but if he weren't here, she doesn't think she would be standing here now. So, really, thanks to him. The MC's eyes widened in surprise and thought, right? His gaze softened, and he thought he almost forgot. Helping others, that used to be everything to him. After a while, Kyosuke turned on the TV at home. The host said they just learned that illegal experiments on people were being conducted in a secret underground lab owned by Lei Roshi of the Pentagram Saints. This came to light after Lei was apparently attacked by an unknown assailant. Lei herself is showing signs of memory impairment, and the identity of the attacker remains unknown. The MC wondered how the others would react. The host said, them. They're interrupting the broadcast with breaking news. Nathaniel of the Pentagram Saints has made a public statement. MC turned around and thought, Nathaniel. Nathaniel said, on behalf of the Pentagram Saints, he stands before them to deliver an urgent message. He can only say that they are shocked by the incident with Lei Roshi. Like her comrades, they feel deep shame that they did not notice Lei's slide into darkness. Kyosuke grew angry and thought, they didn't notice? So the pentagram saints are pretending to know nothing again, just like 20 years ago. He clutched the remote control in his hand and thought, these people haven't changed one bit. They lie without batting an eye, all to protect their precious status as heroes. People like Karen and him, to them, they aren't even victims, mere insignificance. Nathaniel Cavell, judging by his behavior back then, there is a high probability that it was he who directed his murder. But of course, he was always calculating. He's always careful. No one knows where he is now. Kyosuke reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. After a while, Claudia was kneeling and a voice came from behind her. So he said, Lady Claudia. She asked again, is that right? She understood. Lord, let him show them the way to a future full of light. After a while, Nathaniel said, this case is considered closed. Claudia asked, so the attacker exposed Lei's illegal experiments? How disgusting. Ingolf frowned and asked, horror, what was this damned Lei doing? Disgrace the honor of the proud saints of the pentagram. Nathaniel asked, right? However, the experiments were carried out by Lei alone and on her own initiative. The rest of the saints of the pentagram had absolutely no idea about this matter. Hideki sat at the table and thought, typical Nathaniel, he is always rational. In other words, they just dump everything on her and abandon her. He doesn't know about Ingolf or Claudia, but he's sure Nathaniel knew about Lei's experiments. To abandon her so easily. No, more importantly, he needs to carry out his instructions. Claudia said she's a witch and is curious about the attacker. Hideki said, about that, a sealed letter came to the academy from the one who attacked Lei. Claudia said in surprise, a letter from the attacker. Nathaniel ordered Iwako to read the contents to them. Hideki replied, of course. He will read it now. He returned to the current world from the depths of that gate. He will deal with all of them, so let them wait. Misato Kyoichiro. Everyone's eyes widened in fear upon hearing his name. Claudia asked if someone was really using the name Kyoichiro. Nathaniel replied, no, he couldn't have known about the depths of that gate unless he was there. The sender was undoubtedly Kyoichiro. Claudia said he might have used time magic. Ingolf said they had nothing to worry about. If Kyoichiro had truly returned, all they had to do was eliminate him again. Nathaniel folded his arms and said, Ingolf is right. They don't need to act right now. However, why don't they see how Kyoichiro will act? After a while, Ingolf rose from the table and walked to the window. He spoke. Kyoichiro, he's the only one he'll never forgive. At that moment, MC called Hideki and said, so as he ordered, he followed his instructions. Kyosuke replied, he sees. He sat on the sofa and thought, so Nathaniel didn't plan to act right away. He's acting cautiously. Well, that's good. Once they realize he's back, they won't be able to sit idly by for long. First, he'll strike at those whose whereabouts he already knows. MC said, okay, Iwako, they're starting to act. Hideki asked what they'll do next. Kyosuke answered, it's not that difficult. Let him arrange for him to transfer to an academy affiliated with Ingolf. Hideki asked, so he's going to target Ingolf next? MC answered, right, it should be easy through the short-term study abroad program. Right? Hideki asked to let him clarify one thing. This guy isn't like him or Lei. He won't find any bad rumors or shady dealings about him. Kyosuke spoke up, and still, he needs to at least see his face. Well, he'll leave the formalities to him. He hung up and walked to the window. MC said, even if there are no rumors about him now, it doesn't change the fact that he betrayed him 20 years ago. Sometime later, Karen was sitting in class and looking out the window where a plane was flying by. She noticed it and smiled. The plane landed and Kyosuke went outside. He asked, so this is Germany then? He looked at his phone and thought, he had already established a connection between that country's academy and Ingolf. He was using the German academy to get closer to Ingolf. For now, he would head to the academy. At that moment, a scream was heard behind him. How annoying they were. He turned around and said, is she Japanese? He thought, come to think of it, they speak a different language here. He was using Void for automatic translation. The guy said not to refuse like that. Come on, why doesn't she hang out with them for a bit? The other guy said, they promise, she'll like it. Shirato frowned and said, that's why she called them annoying. She refuses to deal with some idiots. The guy asked what she said. The other one reached out his hand to her and said, they will punish her for this. He grabbed her by the shoulder when suddenly the MC's voice was heard. Why don't they leave her alone? The guy turned around and asked, what? Who is he anyway? Shirato also looked at him and Kyosuke said, he's telling them to leave her alone again. Idiots. The guy screamed, he's a bastard. They clenched their fists and released mana. The guys rushed towards MC and shouted, let him not dare underestimate them. Kyosuke put his hand in front of him and used his magic. The guys flew to the side, and Shirato looked at it in surprise and said in one hit, well, well. She turned around and looking at MC thought, what kind of student is this? The guys got up and started running away, loudly announcing that they were sorry. Shirato said, thank you for helping her out. MC said, no need to thank him. It looks like they attracted a lot of attention. He suggested getting away from here. Shirato said, that's a good idea. Kyosuke went ahead and Shirato followed him. Passers-by looked at them attentively, and Shirato thought the last time he was saved like this was when she met that man. After a while, they came out onto another street, and Shirato began to speak thoughtfully. MC turned around and looked at her questioningly. She said, she just wanted to thank him again. Thanks to him, the matter didn't take a serious turn. Kyosuke said, he repeats, you're welcome. He thought apparently she's just being sensitive, although he thinks he's seen her somewhere. Shirato said, by the way, his uniform, is he a Japanese student? MC replied, yeah, he just arrived today on a short-term exchange program. He was just on his way to the training academy. Shirato said that in that case, she would take him there as thanks for the past. MC said he would be grateful. After a while he asked, does she travel the world? Shirato said, yeah. Well, she has her own circumstances. Kyosuke thought, is she the same age? It's rare to meet a girl traveling alone. He asked, isn't it dangerous alone? Doesn't she often get into trouble like she just did? Shirato answered, she's perfectly fine. Despite her appearance, she knows something about spells. Kyosuke thought, but didn't she just get into trouble? Shirato said, anyway, he will be studying at that training academy, right? MC asked, what's wrong with that? Shirato answered, the school is known for its meritocratic system. Many students there think the same way. They have a class ranking system, their own hierarchy, and even a point system to reward achievement. MC replied, I see. He thought it sounded like they took meritocracy much more seriously than in Japan. According to Hideki, Ingolf holds regular training sessions for upperclassmen, which means if he wants to get closer to Ingolf, he needs to prove himself to this meritocratic school. This is perfect, just what he needs. Shirato pointed to the side and said, look, this is it. This is the Lanzig Training Academy. MC waved at her and said, that's enough, thank you. Shirato said, thank him. She didn't tell him her name, right? Her name is Shirato Sayuki. MC replied, I see. He's Asai Kyosuke. Shirato froze and asked again, Asai Kyosuke? He asked, what is it? Shirato replied, nothing. It was just that his name reminded her of someone she knew. Kyosuke replied, I see. Shirato said, anyway, good luck to him at the academy. MC said, yeah, thanks. He thought, Shirato is Sayuki. Huh? Something about her stuck in his memory. He looked around and said, okay, he should get going. After a while, he was walking down the street and heard a shout. There he is. The guy was sitting on the roof and asking, is that him? That Japanese guy who is transferring to them? Let him come here for a second. MC asked, who is he? A young delinquent. The guy waved his hand discontentedly and asked who he was calling a delinquent. Mateo jumped down and said, it's not every day that a Japanese guy transfers to them. Well, he doubts he's anything special, but to avoid giving him the wrong impression of this place, he'll give him a little welcoming ceremony. MC closed his eyes and thought, wow, he just arrived and already ran into a strange guy. Well, just like Shirato said, it looks like he wants to measure his strength in a duel. MC threw down his bag and said, okay, he accepts his challenge. Mateo said, he's glad he understood right away. He swung his fist and said to begin. He sent his mana towards him and said to receive. Kyosuke deflected it with one movement of his hand and the stones flew in the other direction. Mateo asked, what? MC said, the quantity was good, but the power is too weak. He released his mana and said, if we're going to use earth magic. He sent a huge stream of mana towards Mateo and he flew back. MC said, let him at least do it like this. Mateo thought fearfully, what? Who is this monstrous guy? At that moment, Shirato was walking down the street and saying, yes, that's right, Lady Claudia. She contacted Asai Kyosuke. She will stay in Germany and continue observing the target, Lanzig Training Academy. The protagonist picked up his ID card and after looking at it, left the building. He thought, all the paperwork is done. Now he can finally head out to the local dungeons. And the student ID card, he'd auto-translated it, and it looks a little different from the Japanese ones. This must be the same point system Shirato mentioned. Apparently, it tracks dungeon clears and results. Then he put the ID card in his inside pocket and thought, no matter, he has no classes today. He might as well see what the dungeons in this country are like. At that moment, Mateo was watching him, peeking around the corner. After a while, the protagonist approached the gate and thought that if he wanted to get closer to Ingolf, he needed to raise his rank to a special class. Perhaps he could start earning points here, in this high-level dungeon. Then he went inside and looking around thought, ruins, huh? Well, he'd see what kind of monsters would appear here. The next second, several monsters were heading towards him. He thought, undead, and strong ones, huh? He hadn't encountered this type of monster in Japan, but he already knew their weak points from his time as Kyoichiro. With these thoughts, he concentrated fire energy in his hand, and one of the monsters approached him, pointing its weapon at him. The protagonist thought that undead crumbled under the force of impact and fire. That's why. He delivered a crushing blow with his fist, in which he concentrated fire energy, splitting the skeleton in two. The others looked at the defeated skeleton in surprise, and MC extended his hand to them and said that they should attack now. After some time, the room was filled with the bodies of the undead, and he said that this should be the last chamber. The boss should be waiting here. He walked into the huge room and noticing the monster, thought, so this is the boss? What a heavy presence. He concentrated fire energy in his hand and thought that he would first scout the area and attack it using fire magic. Then he sent a stream of fire at the boss, but the boss, in turn, released energy from his staff, stopping the protagonist's attack. He thought he deflected the fireball, right? Naturally, he was the boss after all. Then the boss began concentrating energy in his staff again, after which he sent a stream of liquid onto the floor. The protagonist was horrified to see this and thought, this ball melts everything it touches. It was quite high level, but perhaps he could use this to his advantage. Then several more balls of melting energy flew at him. He took a stance and concentrated the energy around himself, thinking that at the end he would concentrate wind magic on his feet and increase his speed. After that, the boss's attacks flew downwards. He appeared in front of it and concentrated energy in his hand, saying that he would see if it could withstand his own spell. After that, he aimed it straight at the monster's head and then landed down. The next second, the boss behind him seemed to dissolve. The protagonist looked at his clenched fist and thought the effect was significant, but due to the high level of the spell, he couldn't reproduce it perfectly. He needed to level up his void magic. More importantly, he looked to the side and said that he knew he was there. He should show himself. Mateo smiled slightly and said that he didn't think he would notice him. He came out from around the corner and said that he had been watching his fight. He hoped he didn't mind. The protagonist asked, what? Did he want to challenge him to a duel again? He thought, perhaps he hadn't learned his lesson. But that aura, he was clearly hiding something. Mateo walked towards him and added, well, I guess it's time to settle this once and for all. He reached into his pants pocket and MC, noticing this, thought, damn, he's clearly up to something. Could it be another amplifier like Rokshi, or maybe a hidden weapon? But the next second, Mateo raised his hands up, then knelt down and bowing, shouted, please. He must accept him as a disciple. The protagonist was confused. What? He thought, what is he trying to do? And what is that cup? Mateo held out the object in his hand and asked, this is a Japanese dojo, right? And he heard that they pass around sight cups to show respect. The protagonist thought, is he an idiot? Then he added that he can't help it. He's drawn to his power. Please, he must teach him magic. The protagonist replied, yes, he's joking. Mateo said, that fight just now was insane. He feels like an idiot for even bothering him. The protagonist thought, great, things were bound to get more complicated. Then he widened his eyes in surprise and placing a hand on his shoulder said, hey, he asked, what? He's accepting him as an apprentice. Before he could finish speaking, MC pushed him aside, and a powerful explosion occurred next to them, from which a huge monster appeared. Mateo, surprised, asked, what? The protagonist said, so that wasn't the final boss. It looks like the real master has finally appeared. Mateo, frightened, fell to the ground and said, if he remembers correctly, it was the same one. The protagonist looked at him and asked, what's wrong? He replied fearfully that he'd seen that creature in textbooks. The skull dragon, the monster that wiped out an entire village many years ago. They said that Ingolf only miraculously defeated it. Why is it here? Then the protagonist closed his eyes and said, I see. He turned to the monster, and Mateo yelled at him to wait. Was he actually going to fight that thing? This was too reckless. No matter how strong he was, MC looked at him and told him to calm down. And for his information, Ingolf wasn't the one who killed him. He was surprised. What? The protagonist looked at the monster and thought he saw it in the eyes of the Pentagram Saints. Admitting that Kyoichiro was the real winner would be embarrassing. So they rewrote history for posterity. Typical cowards. Well then, he'd just kill it again himself. The monster headed towards him, and he said, okay, let's get to it. The boss slammed his paw on the ground, and Mateo yelled in surprise, what? The protagonist took a stance, while Mateo grabbed his head and screamed loudly. MC thought he's stronger than he was 20 years ago, but that doesn't matter. The next second, he pushed off the ground and concentrated fire energy in his fist, then swung a punch. He told the monster to take it. He delivered a powerful blow to the monster's skull, shattering it into tiny pieces, and then landed on the ground. Mateo clenched his fist and shouted, did they see that? Master! The protagonist said he was terribly energetic. He had to disappoint him, but it wasn't over yet. He was surprised. What? The next second, the monster's head returned to its place, and Mateo asked in surprise, was it regenerating? MC replied, the skull dragon's endurance is relatively high among undead monsters. Hit it with less force and it will just gather itself. Mateo approached it and asked, how did he know that? The protagonist thought it was tougher than he thought. In that case, the next thing to do. Mateo looked at him in surprise and thought, is he going to try something else? But how the hell does he expect to defeat such a monster? Then the boss opened its mouth wide and screamed loudly, releasing a powerful wave. MC and Mateo crouched down, and then the monster's tail headed straight for the protagonist, but he quickly jumped to the side. Mateo, looking at this, thought, what? But this time he just blocks. The protagonist dodged and thought, not yet. The image must be clearer. This is the essence of void magic, creation through imagination. The clearer the image, the greater the power. With these thoughts, he concentrated energy in his hand, and the boss moved towards him, opening its mouth wide. It released powerful energy. Mateo, noticing this, extended his hand towards it and shouted, Master. Then he noticed that the protagonist was holding the monster's jaw. Then it released powerful energy. Streams of water flew forward, and he said, that's it. The monster seemed to start to be washed away, and then its body was covered in ice. Mateo thought, incredible, he is too strong. Sometime later, they were walking down the street, and Mateo, catching up with the protagonist, asked him to wait. Please, master. The protagonist looked at him and asked, what's with all this polite speech? He smiled and replied, well, out of respect. Then he noticed the protagonist looking at his ID and asked if there was something that caught his eye. He replied, yeah, he was just thinking about how many dungeon points you can earn in one run. Mateo, right? How much do points affect your class? Mateo thought for a moment, then said that it was a rough estimate, but every 10,000 points increases your class. The protagonist replied, so to reach a special class, you need about 30,000 points. Mateo then said, unfortunately, dungeon points are awarded at a fixed rate. That dragon skull he just destroyed doesn't give anything extra. The protagonist looked at his ID and thought, he got 500 points for this run. This means he'll have to farm dungeons 600 times just to qualify. Then he said, it seems getting into the special class will take time. Mateo looked at him and said, as expected, he's aiming for the special class. He smiled and, raising his index finger, said, well, there's one way to accumulate points faster. MC immediately approached him and ordered him to tell. He shouted in fear, that's too close. Then they walked forward again, and he said, the thing is, in a month there will be a Festival of Heavenly Grace. The protagonist clarified, Festival of Heavenly Grace? He replied, it's an event where students compete against each other in designated tests. The winner receives an impressive 20,000 points. The protagonist thought that was a lot. If he took first place, he'd immediately get close to Ingolf. Then he clenched his fist and declared that he would take first place in this so-called Festival of Heavenly Grace. A month later, the day of the academic event, the Festival of Heavenly Grace, the host shouted, so, the Celestial Grace Festival is declared open. Mateo looked at the protagonist and said, finally, it's happened, master. He replied, aha, he thought. If he earns enough points and takes first place here, he'll advance to the special class. Then he'll be one step closer to that idiot who betrayed him 20 years ago. Then the instructor said, their mission is simply to seize the gem at the very top of the tower. The method doesn't matter. They must act dirty or fight their way up. The choice is theirs. They must show them the strength they've cultivated. MC thought, sounds like something a meritocratic academy would do. It suited him. Then they set off, and Mateo, waving his fists, said, master, they will take first place, no matter what. The protagonist sighed and thought, when he learned that there were only 2 teams at the Celestial Grace Festival, he didn't know what to do. He was lucky to have the perfect partner at hand. At that moment, Shirato approached them and called the protagonist. He looked at her and asked, she's here, Shirato? She replied, aha. She decided to pop in and see how he was shining. Mateo was surprised. Who was this cutie? Master, is that his girlfriend? He hit him on the head and told him not to talk nonsense. Then, several students shouted, hey, they have to look over there. The protagonist looked at the huge screen and thought, it's Ingolf. At that moment, Haruki, looking at the guests, said, Lord Ingolf, they welcome him to their school's festival. He replied, no need to worry, he's interested in this festival himself. Is there true gold hidden among these young mages? Then the host shouted, students to the tower. The MC and his partner went inside and he, looking around, thought, so this is what it's like from the inside then? Then Mateo slammed his fist into his palm and shouted, okay, they're moving, master. He replied, okay. The next second, a monster appeared right on the stairs in front of them. Mateo was surprised. Right away, the protagonist walked forward and said, as expected, they said they would release pre-created creatures. Mateo asked, what should we do, master? Then he was surprised, not noticing the protagonist in front, and asked, wait, what? At that moment, the protagonist was already attacking the monster in their path. His partner shouted, what? Then the protagonist turned around and asked, why was he slowing down? They have to go. Mateo walked forward and said, exactly, after him. At that moment, the protagonist's face was broadcast on the big screen, and Ingolf smiled and asked, Japanese? The others were surprised. Damn it, that student took him out with one blow. Shirato folded her arms and said that she knew he was unusual. Then Mateo attacked the monsters in front of him, screaming loudly. The protagonist looked at him and asked, is he okay? He smiled and gave him a thumbs up, replying that he was still going strong. Master. MC moved forward and replied, okay, then they must keep up the pace and keep moving. He followed him and replied, yes. Then they continued up the stairs. At one point, the protagonist shouted, stop! He covered his face with his hand, and several pieces of rock fell right in front of them, and Mateo said, ouch! The stairs collapsed in front of them, and on the other side stood 2 students. One of them concentrated fire energy in his hand and said that they would not pass. Mateo clenched his fist and shouted indignantly, you bastards, this is not fair. The student asked, did he say something there? His partner replied that he couldn't hear him from down there. Then they ran up the stairs, shouting that they would see each other again. They would have to sit and watch. Losers. Mateo shouted that they had to go back. Then he turned to the protagonist and asked, master, what now? He asked, what do you mean? What? It's simple. They'll just fly over. He was surprised. Fly over? Then MC put his hand on his shoulder and abruptly moved forward, dragging him along with him. And at that moment, the students stopped near the huge door. One of them said, yeah, damn it, this is the last room. He looked at his partner and added, it was easier than he thought. He said, of course, as if they were going to lose to some random Japanese guy. At that moment, the protagonist said, well, that's a question. They turned around in surprise and shouted, what? How did he get here? He climbed the last step and said that he had to disappoint them, but the obstacle he didn't create barely slowed him down. Mateo climbed up after him and said, yes, they won't lose to clowns like them. One of the students shouted, they're already half dead. They concentrated their energies in their hands, and the student added, they mustn't think they're weaker. His partner added, they'll crush them themselves. The protagonist said, too slow. Then he charged and hit 2 of them at once. They only had time to ask, what? The next second, they fell to the ground. Mateo, looking at the protagonist, thought, wow, he didn't even see him move. Then the protagonist opened the huge doors and they walked forward. In the center of the room was a huge sphere. He said, this must be the gem. Mateo, smiling, clenched his fist and said, yes, they're the first. The protagonist frowned and said, that's not true. It's not over yet. His partner was surprised. What? And then several knights appeared from the ground, and Mateo wondered where did they come from. At that moment, Haruki stood up in surprise and exclaimed, what? What kind of armored knights are these? This wasn't in the program. Ingolf smiled and thought, well, he'll see if they can overcome this challenge. Mateo began to look around and, in fear, put his fist to his face. MC, frowning, looked away and said that these armored soldiers were clearly not human. He thought, a spell to control so many soldiers at once. He knew someone who could use the same magic, Ingolf. This is his doing, right? At that moment, Haruki looked at Ingolf and asked, isn't this his magic, Lord Ingolf? He folded his arms and said, well, something like that. I mean, ending it too quickly would be boring, wouldn't it? He laughed awkwardly, sitting back down, and said that he really was cruel. Ingolf sighed and said that if they wanted to become great mages, handling this number was the bare minimum. He thought, of course, no student could overcome such a number. How would they break through and get the jewel? Ingolf said he'd see what they were capable of. At that moment, Mateo asked, Master, what should we do? He replied, they can't take the gem without defeating them. They had no other choice. His partner looked at him and asked, defeat them? But there's a whole army here, and they all look pretty tough. He replied, still, he has to do it. If he wants to achieve his goal, he said, okay. In that case, at least cover him a little. He clapped his hands, and the next second, the knights attacked him, and he fell to the ground in fear, clutching his head and screaming loudly. The next knight pointed his sword at the protagonist, who used body enhancement magic, and stopped the sword aimed at him with just 2 fingers. He then concentrated energy in his fist and attacked the monster. Those watching from the huge screen were amazed, and with his bare hands, the protagonist added several more blows with his fiery fist, knocking several more knights to the ground. At that moment, Mateo, hiding behind the wall, peeked out slightly and said, damn, the master has completely lost his mind. Ingolf pressed his fingers to his face and thought, this Japanese guy can definitely use serious magic. Does he really plan to wipe them all out? Then he slammed his fist on the table and thought, but it won't be that easy. At that moment, several more knights appeared, and Mateo shouted, they're multiplying again. He thought, what the hell is the school thinking, throwing this at them? At that moment, Shirato thought that with such numbers, he had no chance. Still, she wanted to see if he could break through. So Kyosuke, what's his next move? Meanwhile, the protagonist dodged a huge axe aimed at him and looked at the knights approaching him. He thought, about 30 of them, right? There may be many of them, but compared to that time, it's nothing. Then several spears flew at him, but he created a shield out of the earth, reflecting the attack. At that moment, several more monsters headed towards him, but MC began concentrating wind energy in his hand and directed it at the monster, knocking the weapon out of its hands. He thought, destroying them all one by one is pointless. He would like to erase them all with one large spell, but in a situation like this, he doesn't have the luxury of sitting and building a new image, which means the best option is a spell he's already seen. That way, he won't waste time recreating it. He hates the idiot who used that, but whatever. He closed his eyes and sighing, thought, void magic activation. Streams of energy scattered in different directions. Ingolf stood up from his seat and thought in surprise, this. After that, the protagonist sent streams of magic in different directions. He thought, this should work. He's using a combination of wind and earth magic. The next second, his attackers scattered in all directions along with the entire tower floor. The protagonist approached the gem and, taking it in his hand, declared, game over. Then Mateo peeked around the corner and said, he did it. He shouted, he really did it, master. Shirato thought in surprise, a combination of magic. Can he use that too? The depths of his power were terrifying. Then Ingolf laughed loudly and thought, so he can use the spell Hideki spent 20 years developing while he was just a student. He asked, Kyosuke, right? Interesting. If he gets into the special class, he'll make sure to train him properly. After a while, the host announced, now it's time to announce the student who has been promoted to the extra class this semester. They should welcome Kyosuke to the stage. The MC began to walk up on stage, and the audience began to discuss, that guy is amazing. He only transferred a month ago. He saw what he did at the festival, right? It was insane. He's definitely not human. Mateo, sitting next to them, chuckled and said that for his master, this is natural. After that, the host said that next came the armband ceremony. For this, they invited a special guest. The protagonist frowned and thought, a guest? No way. Haruki said, please, they should welcome him, Lord Ingolf. He walked onto the stage, and the host said that the stage belonged to him. The audience was surprised. What? Seriously? The protagonist looked at him and thought, Ingolf, he really came to the academy. What does he want? Then Ingolf approached the protagonist and, smiling, said that he had quite entertained him at the Festival of Heavenly Grace. He replied that it was an honor. Then, Ingolf handed him the armband and told him to come to his estate tonight. The others were surprised. What was going on? What's he telling him? After that, Ingolf waved into the hall, and MC, looking after him, wondered what the hell he was up to. After a while, the butler bowed and asked, Kyosuke, right? They were waiting for him. The protagonist walked forward and wondered what Ingolf wanted to talk about. Wait, had he figured out that he was really Kyoichiro? He needed more time to prepare. If he knew, he had no choice. Right here, right now, this could all escalate into a fight. Then he entered a room with a huge table full of food. Ingolf, looking at him, said, he's here, he should sit down. They'll talk after the meal. The protagonist walked to his seat and apologized. He thought, so what is this? After a while, Ingolf said again, his exploits at the Feast of Heavenly Grace were impressive, especially that battle on the top floor. This caught his attention. Now there was one question he wanted to ask. What exactly was he hiding? He looked at him seriously, and the protagonist frowned, wondering if he knew. No, it couldn't be. If he really knew he was Kyoichiro, he would have been more direct. He must be looking for something else. Then Ingolf added the fusion spell he used on the top floor. It was Hideki's life's work, which took him 20 years to create. Why could he use it? MC thought he knew it. He was only interested in his magic. Then he waved his hand and said that back in Japan, Hideki gave him special training. Ingolf took the cup and asked, is that so? And that's when he learned fusion magic? The protagonist confirmed it. Apparently, he's just a very good teacher. He owes him everything. Ingolf smiled and said, sounding like he was typical. He'd mastered it well, but he shouldn't use this power for evil, or he'll end up like Kyoichiro, the man who nearly tore this world apart. He must have heard about it. The SSS-ranked dungeon disaster 20 years ago. He drowned in his own power and eventually hatched a twisted plan, pulling monsters out of the dungeon, planning to wipe out the rest of them, his own allies. MC looked at him, perplexed, and thought, what? Ingolf frowned and added, all for the sake of remaining the only hero. With that in mind, he set his plan in motion that day. Luckily for them, they stopped him before that happened. The protagonist clenched his fist and thought, this is complete nonsense. What the hell? These idiots. He can't just let this go. Then Ingolf turned around and added, that's why he's warning him. He shouldn't let the power consume him completely. Before he could finish, the protagonist declared, it's all right, sir. Strength is needed to fight evil, and he will do whatever it takes to become stronger than anyone. Ingolf sighed and said, just like back then at the festival, he's still just as interesting. Okay, he'll reward that spirit of his. He approached the protagonist, who was surprised. Reward him? He replied, exactly. In the next training cycle, he'll personally be his sparring partner. Of course, if he doesn't mind. The protagonist rose from his seat and replied, he understood. It would be an honor to fight him. Sometime later, MC walked down the street and thought, Ingolf, this is the best reward he could dream of. He must wait. He'll destroy him with everything he has, and he'll get even for his 20 years of hatred. Sometime later, it was the day of periodic training for the special class. The students walked forward and muttered, hey, today is periodic training for the special class, right? Yeah, he's jealous that they get to see Ingolf. He would also like to be trained by him. Then the student looked in surprise at the protagonist, who was sitting on a bench and looking at them with a grim gaze. His comrade said they should go, and he agreed, and they abruptly walked forward. The protagonist frowned and thought, Ingolf, he will finally pay the bill. He promised to arrange a mock battle with him during today's training. For him, this was probably just a quick lesson for a curious boy, but for him, it was more than that. He would completely crush him and make him regret the betrayal he committed 20 years ago. After some time, the teacher said, okay, periodic training begins. Lord Ingolf. He walked forward, looking at the students, and the protagonist looked at him and thought, here he is. Ingolf said that he trusted them, the academy's top students. Every day, as always, they honed their skills, but sometimes watching from the sidelines was also training. So today he decided to spice things up with a sparring match. No need to rush, he'd already chosen his opponent, Kyosuke. He should go first. At that moment, Mateo watched the proceedings and said in surprise, this is crazy, he's skipping for a reason. Is the master really going to fight Ingolf? Then he was surprised to notice Shirato and thought, she's the girl who was also at the Heavenly Festival. I see. The master is fine with her. At that moment, she folded her arms across her chest and, looking away, thought she felt a strange gaze, but she would simply ignore it. The Pentagram Saint, hailed as the hero of the world, she would see how he was going to face such an opponent. At that moment, MC stood in front of his opponent, and Ingolf asked, so shall they begin? The protagonist thought, Ingolf is one of the strongest fighters among the Pentagram Saints. He's in a different league than Hideki or Ruoxi, but the one who falters today will be him. Ingolf concentrated energy in his fist and said that he would make the first move then. He sent forward a powerful fire energy, and MC blocked it with his hands. The students watching were surprised. What? Wind magic? Shirato shielded herself with her hand and thought, no, that's not it. The shockwave from the blow alone cut through the air. The protagonist crouched down and wondered if he used body enhancement magic. He parried it with earth magic. Then he sent forward a stone wall. In response to this, Ingolf thrust his fist forward and, having smashed it, asked, yes? He was able to block it. The protagonist asked, was it body enhancement magic? No wonder the blow was strong. He thought that he barely stopped it with the reinforced stone. The power behind that blow is insane. Then Ingolf reached for his cape, chuckled, and said he was mistaken. He tossed it aside and said he hadn't used body enhancement yet. The protagonist looked at him, and he concentrated energy in his fist and said, "This is what it looks like when he uses it." He then sent it forward, leaving a mark on the ground in the wake of his attack. The protagonist covered himself with his hands, and his opponent continued to strike again and again. The protagonist ran in the opposite direction. Mateo, watching what was happening, thought, "This can't be happening. The master is being thrown back? What kind of move was that?" Ingolf, chuckling, asked, "He escaped using wind magic, right? He has sharp instincts, but this fight isn't over yet." He created even more powerful energy and sent it forward. MC continued to dodge. He thought, with such an impact, now is not the time to hold on to his back. He stopped, and Ingolf thought, has he stopped moving? Is he planning to counterattack? After that, MC concentrated energy in his hands. Shirato thought it was the same thing he used at the festival, a combination of magic. After that, the protagonist sent several rocks along with streams of wind straight at Ingolf. He covered himself with his hands and, clenching his teeth, tried to block the attack aimed at him. After that, the smoke cleared, and MC thought the shockwave softened the blow. This is Ingolf. He has become even stronger in 20 years. After that, his opponent smiled and said, "Good, very good." He shouldn't have held back either. After that, powerful streams of energy erupted from his body in all directions. The protagonist, looking at him, thought, "This is magic." Ingolf looked at him and said that they should continue this fight. The protagonist thought, a spell that even he doesn't know. So he mastered it over the past 20 years, huh? All the better. He will see what it's worth. With these thoughts, he stood stoically, focusing his gaze. He thought, he'll start with this. He extended his hand forward, destroying the ground between them. Ingolf thought, earth magic. And the protagonist thought, this explosion covers a large area, making it impossible to dodge. At that moment, Ingolf suddenly leaped into the air, and the protagonist again directed energy at him and thought, if he loses his balance, he will cover him with a combination spell. Then he used combination magic again. Mateo shouted, yes! Damn it! The master is using his combination magic. Shirato thought, he's losing his balance in the air. Perfect timing. He's going to hit now. But at that moment, Ingolf screamed loudly, enveloping his entire body in powerful energy. The protagonist thought, what? What him? He continued to release powerful energy, and then Ingolf contained it with his hands and scattered it in different directions. He grinned. The protagonist thought he'd simply cut through his combined spell. Shirato couldn't believe he'd neutralized magic of that level. Afterward, Ingolf said, the blow was great, but it couldn't penetrate his mana armor. With that, he showed his fist, enveloped in powerful energy. The protagonist thought, mana armor? I see. So that's what that golden glow is. It serves as armor. But to shrug off the combined magic without a single scratch, that's insane durability. Then Ingolf took a stance and said that this armor doesn't just protect him. It turns his entire body into a weapon, combining attack and defense into one. That's the true essence of his mana armor. He stepped forward and, swinging his fist, shouted, here we go. He appeared in front of the protagonist, but he abruptly jumped to the side, dodging the powerful blow. Mateo yelled in surprise. What? MC shielded himself from the flying rocks with his hands. He thought, damn it, Ingolf, he's gotten a lot stronger than he was 20 years ago, and that mana armor of his is causing a lot of trouble. He has a counter, but the spell isn't finished yet. He's not sure he can reproduce it. Then Ingolf flexed his hand and asked, he doesn't want to attack him? Well, it can't be helped. He'll finish it himself. With that, he charged, and the protagonist frowned and thought, damn, he has no other choice. He began concentrating energy in his hand. Ingolf wondered if he was trying to create something. Did he think he'd be stopped? Then he stopped, noticing streams of various energies erupting from the protagonist's hands. He swung his hand, unleashing a fiery attack, sending the protagonist flying back. MC thought he knew it. He hadn't mastered it yet. So on. The next second, Ingolf said, enough. They'd done more than enough for today's mock battle. They were done. MC clenched his fist and his hand trembled. And then the teacher said, that concludes today's training. Everyone's dismissed. One of the students approached Ingolf and said, Lord Ingolf, it was a truly magnificent sight. It truly inspired the students. The students nearby were discussing, this Asai fought well, but in the end, Ingolf had him in a vice the whole time. His comrade agreed. Yes, pentagram saints are amazing. Then Mateo approached the protagonist and said, well done, master. Well, if it's Ingolf, no one will judge him. The protagonist frowned and thought that he had underestimated him. In his current state, he couldn't defeat Ingolf. He'll have to develop his void magic further and become even stronger. With these thoughts, he clenched his fist. And Shirato, watching the students, thought, no one here even realizes how much potential Kyosuke has hidden within him. Ingolf walked forward and frowned, thinking, this moment, what was it? Bloodlust? No, this was something else. And yet, he hadn't felt such a clash in a long time. No matter. Kyosuke, he wasn't the type to stop there. After a while, Ingolf sat in his chair holding a glass of drink. He thought that he hadn't felt a battle that truly stirred the blood in a long time. But this man, Kyosuke, he didn't think he would be so strong, especially at that moment. He even felt fear. But come to think of it, he had felt this once before. He remembered how long ago the protagonist had approached him and said, well, it looks like this is his victory. He looked up at him and asked, "What just happened?" He'd been hiding the spell from him this whole time, right? The protagonist placed his hands on his waist and said, "He almost took him out that time, and besides, he should keep his ace up his sleeve until the very end, right?" Ingolf frowned and thought, he hasn't changed at all, always exceeding his expectations. That's why he's his rival. After that, he rose to his feet and said, they should do another round, Kyoichiro. In the present, he looked out the window and thought, this is bad. Drinking makes him remember, but the past, stained black, can't just become white. And yet that thrill of facing an equal, he missed it. He took a sip of his drink and thought, well then, Kyosuke? He has to show him what he's made of. At that moment, MC stood in the forest. He looked ahead and thought, he hasn't changed a bit in 20 years, huh? Looks like he can use that. In his current state, he couldn't defeat Ingolf. He'd have to relearn from scratch. Luckily, this dungeon was perfect for that. He went deeper into the cave and thought that the gravity field was much stronger here, in the depths, than on the surface. No wonder Ingolf's blows were so powerful, and if he took one full-fledged hit, he'd be finished. So, first, he needed to strengthen this body. Once he could fight him head-on, the spell he'd been working on would be decisive. He had to wait for him, Ingolf. 3 days later, Shirato walked through the academy courtyard and thought, strangely, Kyosuke hadn't returned to the dorm since then. Where could he have gone? Then she noticed a student ahead and wondered, that's it. Mateo, walking forward with the last of his strength, said, it's so boring here without a master. And then she called him, and he looked at her, smiled, and awkwardly scratched the back of his head, saying, yes, this is one of the master's fans. She smiled awkwardly and thought, a fan? Well, it even makes her feel better if people think so. Then she asked if he by any chance knew where Kyosuke had disappeared to. He replied that he wasn't sure of the exact location, but he had heard that he had gone to the Eastern Forest to train or something like that. She thought, the Eastern Forest, really? After that, she turned around and, running in the opposite direction, waved her hand and said, I thank you. He replied, you're welcome. Damn, what a devoted fan. After a while, Shirato entered the forest and, placing her hand on a tree, thought, a hidden dungeon deep in this forest. Yes, this would be perfect for training. But how did he even know about this? He shouldn't have any idea about this place. Unless, really? Perhaps because Kyosuke is Kyoichiro. She thought about a month ago, she'd been given a secret order to investigate anyone who might be Kyoichiro undercover, and Kyosuke was on that list. Even if he really was Kyoichiro, she would be. After some time, she entered the cave and, placing her hand on the crystal, thought that she had come here before on another mission. It was still as stern as she remembered. Is Kyosuke training here? Then she looked ahead in surprise, noticing the protagonist surrounded by a multitude of monster bodies, and thought, there he is. But his aura, it was something else entirely. And all those monsters, had he defeated them all? It surpassed everything she could have imagined. After some time, she emerged back into the forest and said, yes, that's exactly it. At this rate, he might actually reach Lord Ingolf's level. Claudia asked, was the likelihood that he was Kyoichiro? She frowned and replied, very high. Claudia smiled, then laughed and said, as she thought, things are about to get very interesting. She looked at the people worshipping her and spreading her arms said, everything is going according to the Lord's plan. After some time, the protagonist is surrounded by a huge number of monster bodies and says, done. This time, it will hit Ingolf. After a while, Hideki looked at the ringing phone and wondered who it could be. He answered and asked, hello. Ingolf said it was him. Hideki thought, Ingolf, he asked, is something the matter? He replied that he wanted to ask him something concerning a student named Kyosuke. After a while, he said, I understand. That's all he needed. Hideki said, okay. He hung up and thought, Ingolf called to ask him about Kyosuke's past, but he can't reveal that he's really Kyoichiro. If he does, he'll die. He knelt down and clutched his head. Meanwhile, Ingolf hung up and thought that Hideki was hiding something, but he can't find any irrefutable evidence. In that case, the next step. He walked forward, stopping near the door, looked down and wondered, someone had slipped a letter under the door? Who could have sent it? Then his eyes widened in surprise and he thought, that's it. He understands. That's what he thought. He remembered how, in the protagonist's past life, Ingolf sat next to him and apologized for today. He replied that everything was fine. He looked at him and said that his hometown was being destroyed. Of course he would offer a helping hand. Ingolf asked, but was he sure about this? Clearing the dungeon, as requested by the state, would be more profitable for him. The protagonist looked at the sky and, sighing, said that they were just a bunch of important people who wanted to show off their power. He would rather be someone needed by those in need. Ingolf smiled and said, well, he's a good soul to the core. The protagonist added, although this is a good place. Ingolf said, this is Kelda Hill. From here, you can see the sunset in the outskirts better. MC said, I see. He realized he appreciated this place. Then Ingolf called him over and said he wanted to become stronger not just for his city, but for many more places threatened by dungeons. The protagonist laughed slightly and asked why not. He would work with him. Then he stood up, clenched his fist, and said, excellent. He had decided to toughen up here while he was in this country. Ingolf smiled and told him to do whatever he wanted. He replied, then it's decided. In the present, Ingolf looked out the window and thought, after that, They would meet on that hill to test each other's limits whenever they had the chance. But he remembered the city engulfed in flames. Then he stopped, noticing the protagonist in the center of the fire. He thought, he won't involve Nathaniel, Claudia, or the rest of the Pentagram Saints in this. He said that he would be the one to put an end to Kyoichiro. Meanwhile, MC walked down the corridor. He thought that the next training session was in a week. Then he would settle the score with Ingolf, this time for sure. He was pulled out of his thoughts by Mateo, who was running after him and shouting, "Master, he's back." The protagonist looked at him and asked, "What's so urgent?" He handed him a letter and said that the director asked him to give it to him. The protagonist was surprised. "A letter?" He confirmed it and said that he should take it. Then MC opened the letter and widened his eyes in surprise. Mateo asked, "What was in it?" The protagonist turned around and said, "Nothing." At that moment, hiding behind a column, Shirato was watching them. After a while, Ingolf, looking into the distance, said, "He came." The protagonist said, "Kelda Hill, the reason why he called him here." Ingolf said, "That's right, he knows who he is, Kyosuke." "No, Kyoichiro." MC asked, why he called him here. He turned around and asked, "Isn't it obvious? To erase his existence from the face of the earth." With these words, he furrowed his brows and concentrated energy around himself. The protagonist also began to concentrate energy and said, "Is that so? Well, he will reciprocate." He shouted that he himself would escort him to the next world. Then the protagonist asked for permission to ask a question. He said he was sure he was Kyoichiro. How did he know that? Ingolf said he didn't need to know, but only he would tell him. The Pentagram Saints had nothing to do with it. It was purely his personal matter. The protagonist asked, why did he choose this place? He replied, exactly. He shouldn't doubt it. He would never forgive him. With these words, he prepared for battle, and the protagonist replied, what a coincidence. It seemed they understood each other. They concentrated energy in their bodies, and Ingolf, raising his fist, said that, as he had seen in the mock battle, his mana armor blocks any attacks. Be they physical or magical, it doesn't matter. What do you mean, Kyoichiro? He doesn't have a single chance of winning. He sighed, then unleashed several magical attacks. He thought, what will he do now? During the last mock battle, all he could do was dodge. If things were the same, he'd just blow him away with another shockwave. He swung for a strike, concentrating energy in his hands, but the next moment, MC kicked off the ground and rushed forward. His opponent was surprised, thinking, what? He's charging head-on? Then the protagonist concentrated energy in his hand and rushed forward with lightning speed, delivering several punches. After he got close enough, he concentrated energy in his fist, and their fists met, creating an explosion and sending them flying. The protagonist frowned and thought, what can I say? His armor is as hard as rock. Ingolf wondered if he had really penetrated the shockwave, and what's more, his punches were more powerful than before. That physique, he can see he's trained, but that's not all, right? Did he really copy his mana armor? Pathetic. Then he gritted his teeth and said, Kyoichiro, he's figured out the essence of his magic. His so-called void magic is based on copying other people's spells, right? But a fake will remain a fake. Such cheap tricks won't work against him. His time magic, that was admirable. He even revered it. He placed his hand on his chest and added, but he's not the same anymore. He's fallen deep, and he'll never be able to penetrate his mana armor. He concentrated his energy and added, never. The protagonist asked, copying, huh? Close, but it wasn't. Void magic goes much deeper. It took him a while to imagine it, but he thinks he can show him now. Ingolf thought in surprise. This must be the move he tried at the end of the sparring, his final trump card, and yet it wouldn't change anything. No known spell could penetrate his armor. Then he abruptly charged and thought, void magic. The protagonist spoke. Void magic must activate. Before he could finish speaking, Ingolf pointed his fist at him and shouted, he must get it. But at that moment, a few drops of blood burst from his hand. He looked at it in bewilderment, then grabbed his hand and thought, did he hurt his hand? No way. Did he penetrate his armor? That couldn't be it. No one could do that. The protagonist said he told you so. Void magic isn't just copying. Ingolf asked in surprise, is that a fire sword? He looked at the weapon in MC's hands and asked, what is that? He answered, creation through imagination. This is the true essence of void magic, and now he must feel its power for himself.